Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel Fanfiction podcast. Today we will continue our journey of what if Belle became the wild child of Freya. Before we start, please like, share, subscribe, and comment in the comment section if you want anything. Chapter Notes. Hammer in some news and bonds. See the end of the chapter 4. Notes. Hammer in some news and bonds. I can't believe we made that much, and these items. How is it dash? Mr. Welf, I think we forgot to mention the motto of our motley crew when you first joined. Apologies, but I advise you take this into consideration from now on. Welf blinked a few times as he felt Lily patting his stomach as he looked down, with his hands full of his portion of earnings they made today in the dungeon, as well as the rare materials he wanted in the 11th and 12th floor in the past, plus a little extra they got from traveling to the 13th floor. He wondered what he had gotten himself into when he joined as he looked at the tiny girl. What's this group's motto? First, it's not a group or a party. It's a crew, and don't ask about it. It will make sense for you later down the line. Oh, okay. As for our motto, well, there isn't an exact one per se, but it follows something like this. Welcome to the crew, leave your sanity where you left off and prepare for adventures and romance. Lily said with a chipper cheer as she pumped her fist in the air, making Belle stop his talking with Philvis as she and her turned around and did the same. Though with Philvis she was a bit embarrassed about it. Leave my sanity. How long has it been since you joined? Give or take maybe 2 weeks. Though one of them was meant to be a temporary thing, while I was still a supporter for another familiar. But that's the advice I've been given by Master Bell, his father, his uncle, Hulluin, and Hythe when I first joined and meet them. Lily said with a shrug as Welf's eyes widened as they continued to walk down the streets of Orario. As the sun was setting, his gaze turned to Philvis as she was startled at how fast his gaze moved towards her, watching as he nearly dropped his materials before putting them away in his pockets and bag. He had to buy from the merchant Paulie's shop. And how long have you been in this crew, Phil? Welf asked as Philvis pouted and Lily looked at Welf with a dull look and shook her head, all while Belle had to hide his snickering from the pouting elf who then had her embarrassed and bashful look on her face. Well, just today actually. Mr. Bell actually had wanted me to join him in a few dives in the past, but we were mixed up with different schedules until we finally had the time. I wouldn't mind joining his crew. It felt nice and fun today. Bah! Come on, Philvis, you're already part of the crew. No need to think like that. Besides, Orna's part of my crew too, so who says you can't? Bell said as he laughed and waved off Philvis's doubt as she smiled, making Welf pale and now treading his feet against the road. Did I sign over my soul to the devil? PFT. No. You signed your heart and soul over to Faye when you joined. Like I wanna take away her eye catcher. Bell said nonchalantly as Welf nearly tripped over himself and became embarrassed by his words. Lady Hephaestus has her eye on me. Duh. I told you she keeps talking about you whenever I visit or she comes over to my familiar's manor for some tea time with other goddesses she invites. Plus, if she offered me to have you, I'd reject it. Wait, what? Why? Mr. Welf, please lower yourself before you cause a scene. And try not to sound too heartbroken and desperate. I had no idea you had eyes for Master Bell. Lily shivered as she said that, moving closer to Bell at his side and holding onto the end of his sleeve just in case as Philvis blushed and looked between Bell and Welf before looking away and whistling. It's not like that. Welf whispered quietly as both girls let out a sigh in relief. Good to know the feeling's mutual. You might be a bit interesting, but sadly, you're not my type. Bell admitted with a straight face as Lily chocked on her own laughter and Philvis looked at Welf as though trying to console him. Why do I have the feeling I've been rejected? Don't worry about it. Right now, worry about what to stuff your face with once we order. Mema, give me a large table for 4. Bell said as he turned to the right and kicked the door open, yelling out his demand as the 4 of them entered inside the hostess of Fertility and walked around until Ryu came up to them. Sir Bell, happy to see you and your party have returned safe and sound. New members, perhaps? Ryu said with a bow as Welf and Philvis returned the gesture. Bell then made a move with his hand, open-palmed as he aimed it as though pointing at Ryu with his fingers, facing her before flicking his wrist as though backhanding the air at her. Oi, come on Ryu, Tilda, we talked about this. None of this, sir, nonsense. And yeah, they are part of My crew since today, Belle said with a grin, but frowned when he saw Ryu shaking her head at him as to disapprove his request. I'm sorry, Sir Belle, but you know the reason why I cannot do that. Even if you keep insisting, or order me to do so, I will call you with such respect you've earned and gained. Besides, SYR doesn't particularly mind it. Rather, she enjoys it. She hopes one day that I may call her Madam. Ryu said as her eyes shifted to another part of the hostess, ensuring Belle followed her gaze as she saw SYR serving other customers their ale as she noticed them and waved. SYR's future fantasies aside, one of these days I will get you to stop. Still, there any room for us? We've got some eating and a sit down with each other we gotta do. Belle said as he pointed behind him with his thumb as he saw Lily waving at her and Philvis and Welf nodding their heads. We do have a booth available, if you would follow me. Though I must advise it doesn't give you a good view of the kitchen window. It is close to it, but sadly you won't be seeing your food cooking. Damn it. Ah well, I'll take what I can get us. You girls are busy today. Your help with our new menu items is the reason why. May seem to have taken your advice and inspiration from the meal you made. Mama was very happy to see the results of your cooking now giving her profits. Curses. If I had known it would have costed me a place at the bar or get a bad seat I would have said it tasted terrible. But would you have said that? Hell no. You girls' cooking is amazing. Is this normal for him to be obsessive about food? Welf asked as they were brought to the booth and took their seats. Lily next to Belle as Welf was next to Philvis who sat at the end of the seat to where Lily and Welf first entered, making Belle sit next to Lily and across from Philvis. You should see how he eats. If you thought the snacks I've been giving to Master Belle and the rest of us were just to satisfy him until we ate lunch, then you haven't seen how much he can put away. Lily said as Welf's jaw dropped before he rubbed his forehead with his hand. I almost forgot how quickly he ate that large lunch you pulled out of your bag. Mama, give me half of the usual and whatever my crew is ordering, and one of my meals. Better be the food I showed you how to cook. Make it up to me for not having a good view of your kitchen. Belle said as he stood up from his place at the booth and pointed at MIA, who tossed him a large bottle of beer and a plate with plastic wrap tied to it, placing them down at the table and giving the plate to Lily as he never took his eyes off the dwarf woman who smirked at him. As Lily opened up the wrapping to see it was an appetizer. Plate of fries, carrots, celery and cheese sticks and garlic bread. Just sit your royal ass down and enjoy some appetizers and beer while I get the girls back to hell and prep your meals. Ryu, don't just stand around. Get their orders and get your clumsy ass in here and help in hell. And I don't want to see their drinks empty either. SYR. Don't you dare sneak off to your man to offer service. Wait those tables, damn it. We're gonna need more beer here, MIA. One's not enough. Belle yelled back as he sat down. And soon his table was given glasses as Lily started to pour each of them a drink as Ryu handed them menus and brought our pen and pad. I'm surprised he can talk back to the owner. Word around has it you mess with her or her staff in this place you'll wish you met death instead. Welf said with a shiver and baffled at how the two interacted. Philvis even agreeing with him as she nodded as well while Lily pointed to the menu and began to order her food. This is rather common. Since Sir Belle's arrival to our pub, he's become Mama Mia's favorite. Regular, as well as ours. He offers plenty of valid and generous tips for us and advice on our meals to improve them. Speaking of, might I ask for your orders? Ryu said as she moved over to their side of the booth as they scrambled at their menus and placed their order. Welf was a simple man, ordering a medium-rare steak with sides of fish skewers and an extra bottle of beer for the table, while Philvis was interested in the new items placed on the menu, and ordered the cheese croquet bowl and a small side of Caesar salad, reading it on the menu as it was said to be a delight for elves. So, Belle, do you always eat a lot? Welf asked, trying to break the ice as Belle had some garlic bread in his mouth, watching him swallow it whole and taking a drink from his glass, as he then looked back at him with a puzzled look. Also, should you be really drinking? You're still a kid, aren't you? I'm 15. And of course I eat a lot. I'm a growing guy. Plus in my travels, I had to eat what I can find at a moment's notice. I've had to go through days, sometimes weeks without eating, before I was able to find something or a town when I was lucky. Belle said as he reeled back and relaxed in his seat, surprising the others to hear his traveled before coming to Orario. Mr. Belle, you've traveled before coming to Orario? Forgive me if I say this, but isn't that a foolish and reckless idea? Without a blessing or large party, there are still strong monsters that spawn out in the areas and even dungeons. Filvis asked as Bell waved his hand off and smirked. Nah, it wasn't too bad. I had training before I had to leave home and explore the world. Before coming to this place, the worst I've been in was around the time I was in this country, in Asia called China. I had gotten lost and wandered around the whole place sightseeing, until I realized I entered the Emperor of China's palace and stumbled to where he kept his courtesans. A palace. An emperor's palace, and of all the places to get lost you entered what is essentially a pleasure district. Welf and Lily asked, bewildered at how he got in and what on earth were the guards doing to allow him to somehow sneak inside. Were you in any danger when you were caught? How long did they realize you weren't meant to be there? Filvis asked, eyes trembling and now looking worried as Bell laughed and pointed at her before pointing it upward. Hee. See, they didn't realize it till after 3 days. I had gotten lost and meet with one of the Emperor's courtesans. Being one Lady Gyokuyu, the Crimson Empress, had meet me while I was in the gardens. She guided me into her palace, and there I was entertaining her, somewhat with my stories and tales of other places I've been in. Why you entertained a courtesan, and the Crismon Empress no less? How long dash? Oi, Welf, I heard you were a shut-in, but keep your head out of your soot-covered anvil. It was just stories and tales and a few entertaining things like song and dance. She has a kid, in. No way would I do something like that to a taken woman. Bell said with a dull look at him, as Lily and Filvis sighed in relief. I see, but Master Bell, what happened with you when they did catch you? Did you have to work off in labor in exchange for your life? Or did this emperor have you preformed tasks in exchange? Well, after about the 3rd day staying with Lady Gyokuyu and her ladies-in-waiting, along with making friends with her special lady-in-waiting Mao Mao, she was visited by this guy who I guess was the head of the courtesan palace. He was pretty annoying to be honest. I'll bet he was. To see that his men were slacking in allowing you to slip by their defenses, and have stayed with the Crimson Empress for 3 whole days. He must have been furious. To learn there was an intruder in the palace and no one had noticed until he saw you. Filvis reasoned as Lily and Welf agreed with her, until they saw Bell shook his head. Nah, he was annoying the fact that me and Mao Mao were getting close. From what she tells me is like a creepy, pretty boy leech that always puts her to some dumb work he's supposed to do himself. When he had me brought to the Emperor in chains and ropes, he was very happy about it, and I think he expected me to get the death sentence. Well, since you're here with us, I can only imagine how frustrated he must have felt. Welf said, smirking as he sipped his beer as Bell laughed and smacked the table. Like you wouldn't believe. Turns out, Emperor Qin Shi Huang apparently knew of me already. By that point I guess word of my travels and reputation spreaded to him and Lady Gyokuyu told him of how I was quite the entertainer. Next thing that annoying leech saw was me and Huang were demanding a feast and drinking while inviting the other courtesans to party. Lily is curious. What on earth did you do in your travels that made you known all the way to China, and most likely other parts or areas you may have traveled before? Lily said with a quirked eyebrow raised as Filvis and Welf were now wondering the same. Nope. Not telling yet. Why not? The 3 of them cried as Bell then pointed at Welf and Filvis and smiled. Because this is meant to get to know the 2 of you better. It's no fun if I'm taking away the excitement of this little dinner party by talking about myself. Bell said as he drummed the table and bounced up and down in his seat, looking at them with glee in his eyes as Lily pouted at being left out in hearing more about Bell. Come on, Tilda, start talking a bit about of yourselves. Bell said as Welf and Filvis looked at each other, embarrassed as they didn't know who to start this off. Welf extended his hand towards her, taking it as to allow her to start first. Nodding her head at Welf, she cleared her throat and looked at them all. My name is Filvis Chalia, and I am this part crew's magical swordswoman. I'm 19 years old and cherish my friend Lefia. And, apologies if I avoid you sometimes. It's not because I'm an elf, but rather, I am cursed. I don't really have much control of it, but it causes bad luck to happen to me and I rather not get others involved. Nope, I refuse that. You're part of our crew, Filvis. You're involved with us till the end. Besides, don't you remember I made with my ex-mom? I tested it out and everything. You're Not cursed, Filvis. Heh, you're a good person, no way would you be cursed. Bell said as Lily nodded as Welf looked puzzled by her. Agreed. If Master Bell says you're with us, then that's that. If he can take in Lily, then he can take you in the crew just as easily. I mean, I get being cursed and feeling odd about it. I hate my bloodline too and avoid making those weapons. But that doesn't mean it defines you to seek others out. Oh, look who's talking, Otaku Smith. One way or the other I'll knock out the stupid out of that head of yours, and you'll be surprised to see yourself making such awesome stuff. Oh, Otaku. What is that? And hey, I'm not antisocial. I can get along with people fine and at least make an attempt. Blah. Not what I hear from Tsubaki and Pauli before. Now shush. Let Filvis finish. Anything else you want to say, Filvis? Hobbies. Dreams. Bell said as he looked back to her. As inside, she felt her heart beat, smiling as she remembered when he was the first person she touched. Even if by force, she remembered that warm feeling in her hands as she tightened her fingers around the glass cup a little. All right. As for hobbies, well, I find myself often window shopping for swords. And maybe trying out outfits is a hobby. Lefia got me to be open and try new dresses every now and then. As for a dream, well, call it silly, but I hope to maybe grow as a person and be the most skilled magical swordswoman possible. Oh, Tilda, what do you want to do when that happens? Or what do you think you'll do when you reach that level of skill you want to achieve? Bell said as Filvis's ears were red as she looked around. And maybe to cut a mountain. No, forget that. It sounds so childish. A mountain. Huh. Filvis, if you're part of my crew, then I'll see it you carve a mountain. No. Make it 3 mountains at once. Mr. Bell, please. It's embarrassing. No such thing exists with my crew. We've all got dreams that sound childish. Yup. My dream is to someday find treasures and become a successful merchant or barterer, selling all the treasures I can find to make some valise and lead an exciting life. Lily said, earning Filvis's surprise and feeling glad about her dreams, and awed at how ambitious Lily's dream was. See, we've got ambitious and childish dreams. Your turn, Welf. Come on now, before the food gets here. Bell said, as all the attention was on him as he blushed and looked away, grumbling until he downed the last of the table's bottle of beer and smacked himself a bit, before turning to them. Well, I'm Welf Krozzo. I'm 17 and lived in Rika until I left that place with the help of another goddess that wanted to leave. I left because I wanted nothing to do with my crap old man's demands to make a magic sword for the king and god there. My hobbies are smithing and sometimes wood carving. First thing we got to do, find you a new hobby. Smithing is your job. You can't stack them twice. No wonder Tsubaki says you're a shut-in. Though, wood carving is kinda interesting. Bell said as Welf clenched his teeth and growled. I'm also good at working on fabrics. Okay. It's something my grandma taught me before her time. God rest her soul. Here. Bell, Lily and Philip said as they slammed the bottom of their cups on the table, before raising them and taking a drink. Well, as for a dream I have, I want to be able to surpass my skills as a smith, using my own 2 hands instead of my skill to create those cursed swords, to create something even better than them. Something that will put those magic swords to shame and my family pissed off the fact that it was my own hands instead of my ability that created a better item than our ancestors. Welf said as he clenched his hand tight into a fist, unknowingly smiling as was Bell. So we've got a treasure hunter, a master magic swordswoman and a renowned smith as dreamers in our crew. He. We sure are a lively one, aren't we? Bell said as the others smiled as they looked at one another, unable but to agree that they are an odd motley crew. Wait, what about your dream, Master Bell? And what are Huluan's and Hytha's dreams? Well, I don't know Huluan's dream. Frankly, because I haven't asked her. Hytha's, I think. It was something to do with surpassing medicine and making sure someone she calls shitty Saint doesn't get ahead of her. Bell said as he looked up, trying to remember if he did ask Huluan's dream or if she mentioned something. Mr. Bell, while I know that you desire to have plenty of adventures with us and others in the dungeon, along with Miss Tiona, from what she tells about you, do you have a specific dream in mind you wish to come true? Filvis asked as Bell blinked, smiling wide as he leaned back at the booth. Nah, I'm too selfish to have one single dream. I have plenty of dreams and things I want to do someday. They There's my first dream I've had since I was a kid. One that I'm still hoping for and looking to happen someday. Bell said wistfully as he leaned on the table and looked up, hands resting his chin as he smiled. Mind if you say what your first dream is? It's kinda simple, but something I wanted since it happened. I want to meet my first friend. Again someday. Back home he was the first friend I ever made, even if he was stubborn about it and often kicked my butt. Yet, we were always training and fighting to get stronger and go out into the world. Seems like he was more of a brother figure. Welf said as Bell shook his head. Nah, we were friends, until circumstances had him to move away from the village. Honestly, I tried to fight him and told him if I won he had to stay. But, I got my ass handed to me badly. At first I was crying and begging him to stay. Until we settled on a promise to get stronger and meet again someday and fight. So, you plan to fight your friend the next time you see him someday? That's a bit odd. Even if you wanted to, what then? Will you have him join you if you win? Phylvis asked as she raised her glass to take a sip of her beer. Nope. I'm not gonna make him join my crew. Asterisk PPPPFFFTTTTT. Asterisk. Lily and Phylvis spat out their drinks all over Welf and Bell, coughing and hacking as Welf complained and looked for some napkins to wipe off the spit and drool on him. As Bell ducked away and wiped off the beer with a napkin before sitting back in the booth as Ryu and SYR were coming over with their orders of food. Hey, come on, why did you do that? What happened? Was the beverage not to your liking? Ryu asked as Phylvis and Lily turned to them and gripped onto Bell's shoulders and pushed him forward to the two waitresses. Miss SYR, call a doctor immediately. Something is wrong with Mr. Bell. Elf waitress, do you have an ice pack? Or something to check for any temperatures or to identify any illness on you? Master Bell has gone mad. Hey, why are you accusing me if I did something wrong or there's something wrong with me? Yeah, what's wrong with my Bell? He may be a bit selfish and act like a fool, but he's perfectly fine, and with my cooking, he should be healthy as a dash. He just said he wasn't going to take someone into his crew. He's not fine. He's being considerate. Lily and Phylvis said, making Bell irritated as a vein formed on his forehead. I can be considerate. And what's wrong with not forcing him to enjoy the food? Bell yelled out as he dove onto the floor, catching the fallen trays and plates of food with his hands, balancing one he caught with his head and one tray with several dishes with his teeth. SYR had her hands covering her mouth and Ryu now limp and nearly fainted if it wasn't for MIA and Lunoir coming over to see what went wrong. BB Bell isn't being selfish this time. Bell, is there something wrong? Tell me please if you feel anything. SYR said as she shook him by the shoulders as he was now struggling to keep his balance. Ryu, what happened? LL Lunoir, wake me from this accursed nightmare. Bell refuses, Gare. Will you Morans knock off this drama? This is a pub, not a theater. MIA yelled as she smacked SYR and Ryu in the head, unfortunately knocking out the elf as she laid limply in Lunoir's arms and SYR now on the floor twitching and getting up with a large steaming bump on her head. She moved her over and helped Bell with grabbing some of the trays and plates and settling them down on their booth and helping Bell up, dusting him off and ruffling his hair before she placed him back into his seat, and now leering down at Lily and Phylvis, who shrank in their seats and clinged onto whatever they could grab. For Lily, she clinged to Bell's arm, preventing him to get more food and instead had to use one hand to get a plate of his meal and start to eat it slowly. Phylvis was practically tearing off Welf's black kimono away from him at how hard she was gripping it. Mind explaining why your idiot friends panicked and caused my girls to act like said idiots? And what's this about you refusing something? MIA asked, looking over at Bell, who had a face full of pasta before slurping it and swallowing it down. I was trying to explain a dream of mine I have to hope come true someday. Meeting an old friend again and fighting. They asked if I was gonna make him join my crew, and I said no. Odd of you to not want your friend to join you, isn't it? Figured you'd be happy to have him join your adventures. Yeah, it'd be nice. But that would stop him having his own adventures. He left to search and travel the world with another friend of ours. They have something to look for and find. So, who am I to get in the way of their adventures? If they need help and we're on the same adventure together, then I'll help him. Aside from that, it'd be fun to meet them again and we each tell our own tales to each other. Oh Tilda, so that's why you didn't want to make him join you if you ever meet again. Now, why couldn't the two of you let him explain himself first? Welf said as he finished wiping off the beer and spit on his face and clothes and grabbed his food. Lily and Filvis scowled and leered at Welf as they got their own food as Mia shook her head and sighed. You better tip well then for nearly having my plates broken and food wasted. Hey, that was Syr and Ryu's fault. And I had to save our plates and food. I'll tip, but throw in 2 extra meals for free. 1 meal and another bottle for the table. 1 meal and dessert. Blueberry pie. Deal then, kid. Hestia, tend to the kids' table for the rest of their stay while I scold this worried idiot girlfriend of his and this useless elf. Lunwa, put Ryu in one of the rooms for now and help Anya with tending tables. Mia said as Lunwa nodded as she went upstairs to the staff's rooms to set Ryu in a bed as Syr whined and tried to reach out to Belle. Mama, please show mercy. Hell no. I get worrying about your boyfriend, but you on the clock. Welf, Lily and Filvis watched and prayed for Syr's luck as the dwarf woman dragged her to the back rooms. Much to her pleas and begging of mercy, they went silent to people's ears as some watched the impending doom that may be brought upon her, hoping it would be swift and quick. Wait, she's your girlfriend, beholy crap. How did you finish that many plates of food? Welf screamed as he saw Belle now onto cleaning up another plate, with a stack of 5 next to him as he looked at him while still chewing on his food. What? I'm a growing guy. I can burn through this stuff in a few hours and work it off with some training and dungeon diving. Plus, gulp you should take my advice on eating while you can. You're older than me, but how is it I have more meat on my bones compared to your chicken arms? Hey, they are all muscle. Besides, I'm only 2 years older than you and maybe Lily. I could probably beat you in arm wrestling. Age has nothing to do with muscle strength. If I can kick Alan's ass and take a beating and survive, then odds are I can accidentally break your arm if we arm wrestled. Belle said, taking a bite out of his steak as Filvis giggles as Lily sticks her tongue at Welf, who paled and brought his arm back from pointing at Belle. This is rather an amusing night. If we did this on occasion after each dive, I feel as though things will be quite lively around us. Filvis said, mewing at her first bite of her order and crossed her legs, finding the taste to be exquisite, and now began to wolf it down, making Lily and Belle laugh as Lily took her time and enjoyed her meal as Belle raised his glass to blink as he felt his shoulder tapped on and saw Hestia holding another bottle and poured his glass till it was filled again. Hee. How's it hanging, Hestia? Doing some good work to pay off your debt. I'm doing fine, Belle. And I'm surprised how much I'm earning, plenty thanks to tips and Mia's warnings to idiots trying to flirt and looking at me weirdly. I even made a decent dent into my debt I owe to Hephaestus. The goddess said as Belle smiled and clacked his glass against the bottle she held. Well, that's pretty good. Pretty soon after a few visits from us you'll be debt-free. Maybe. Faster if Welf here can sway Faye off her feet and have her forget your debt. Welf. Seduce. Your goddess ASAP. Asterisk cough cough asterisk www what? What the hell do you take me for? I can't seduce my goddess. Sure you can. Make her a weapon that strikes at her heartstrings and show up to her bare chested and sweaty. Make a ring for her or something and be a romantic about it. She's got her eyes on you like I said. But she's a goddess. And she's a woman. Belle and Hestia said together, as Hestia agreed that her friend was a woman and has heard her love for this Welf child of hers. And she'd be happy to see her friend give romance a chance again after her little experiences with another goddess once upon a time. Perhaps Mr. Welf is rather inexperienced with the ideas of romance after being cooped up in his smith. Lily teased as Welf's head looked like a cherry tomato and growled at Lily as Filvis and Belle laughed. PP, perhaps Mr. Welf is shy with woman. Though from what I hear, dedicated smiths have an odd reaction with women. LL Lefia mentioned another one that's overdramatic. When he sees Miss A's he practically screams up into the heavens when she visits him to request weapons. Ha ha ha. Smiths are idiots with romance. Then I guess Welf is a cherry boy then. I am not. I've been in the pleasure districts before and experienced some things there and spent a night. I dunno tilde, you seem to get flustered with Faye tilde, plus you look like a tomato right now. Even a cherry. Hestia chimed in as Lily and Filvis kept snickering and laughing. Cherry boy Welf. He. I think that has a nice ring to it. Indeed, Miss Chalia. All in favor of that being Mr. Welf's nickname. Now wait a minute. I never agreed to dash. As captain of this crew I agree. Cherry Boy will be one of Welf's nicknames until he's flirted. Or get Faye's attention. Sound like a reasonable term to set right Hestia. I agree. And word of advice from a friend of hers, Mr. Blacksmith. You better pour your heart into whatever you make her tilde o. And she also has a thing for muscles and hard working men. So do your best. Hesita said as she gave Welf 2 thumbs up as she ignored the fact the young man was slumping down in his seat covering his reddened face. See, even Hestia is helping you out. Be a man. Know what? Let's make this a party now. MIA. Get me some more bottles and I'll pay for Hestia's food. We're celebrating. I'll want that money now if you're taking one of my staff to join you for food. I've got 4 million valis from my share of the dungeon today. I'll give you half of it for our food and drinks, her tips, and for Hestia's and SYR's time. Only Hestia. I'm having your girlfriend under wraps for nearly losing me money. I'll raise it to 2.5 million if you at least let me take her out on a date later in the week. Fine. You better eat your fill and Hestia. I better see them all lively. MIA said as some of the people of the pub were awestruck at Belle somehow bartering with MIA and she complying. Even utterings of Lucky Rabbit at how he was dating one of them and getting lowly big-boobed goddess to dine with them. Master Belle, you should honestly learn to save money. Sure, this is a nice evening for us, but hee. Come on, Lily, you've seen my money and treasures back home. Plus, there's some of the other treasures and money I've gotten saved during my travels that finally transferred over to here in Orario's guild storage. I'm wise enough to know to save for emergencies, and Pops helps me out with managing it. Belle said as he poured her cup and then on to Filvis's and Welf's, turning his head to now seeing Hestia pulling up a chair and now dining with the group. Placing down another large bottle for the table and a few extra plates she sent over to Hestia to deliver. And lastly, placing down the blueberry pie for them all as it was still steaming and fill their nostrils with the sweet and oddly sour scent of baked berries. Now, let's party to our newest crew members and for Faye's love life to come from Cherry Boy. Don't call me that. Then flirt with her and I'll stop calling you that name. But you'll be screwed if one day that becomes your adventurer nickname given by the gods. Chapter end notes. To those that have messaged me and are concerned about the issue I've had lately on Wattpad, I've updated there already and would like to clarify that I'll try to update and post more work soon. Stuff is getting in the way and there's been issues going on with Wattpad where I almost lost my entire works. It's been fixed, but this does lead me to maybe thinking of posting more works here. I'll keep writing and trying my best to provide you all some good stories and chapters in the future. Close friends uniting after hell. Close friends uniting after hell. Hoof. That was a pretty filling meal last night. Though I'm surprised how Filvis was after a few drinks. Belle muttered as he walked out of his room in his blue pajama bottoms and a baggy white shirt, scratching his head as he was walking towards Lily's shared room with Haluan as he went to see if she was awake today. Wonder if we should do a quest today or try the 14th. He murmured as he reached the door and knocked on it a few times, waiting for a while before he knocked again, this time calling her name and had his hand on the door handle. Lily, are you awake? If you need more time to sleep, I can check back on Dash. Belle's eyes widened as he nearly fell and heard a small eek. His face soon flushed as he felt his face now landing on something soft and felt silk fabric. Be Belle. He shivered as he placed his hands on the door frame and slowly pulled himself away, his face turning bright red at the sight he was seeing, and got a better look at who made him fall and what he landed on. BB breasts. And they are not SYRS. They were so big and soft and not now little. Me. Belle thought as he bent his knees and crossed his legs slightly as he looked up, blushing further as he was now meet with Haluan's eye frantically looking around as she crossed her arms over her body and tried to cover herself up with her sleepwear. Or, rather lack of one, as it was practically her undergarments that had a frilly see-through veil around her hips and starting underneath her black lacy bra she had on. I'm so sorry about that, Haluan. I was just checking on Lily and thought Hythe had you resting in the medical beds for now since Lady Freya's recent episode. Belle said as he waved his arms and covered his face with his arms and looked away. And no. I just moved back in 2 days ago. And I apologize, I should have asked who was knocking before suddenly opening it. Well, it's your room, so I should have said something first. Belle said as both teens were, blushing but felt themselves growing calmer as they each took in a few breaths in before they could look at each other now, though still covering themselves up and or slouching their legs. Well, I'm glad to see you're back to good health. I don't know exactly why you had to go through that with Lady Freya every time, but at least you weren't hurt. Things have been kinda hectic without you and I missed seeing you around. Belle said, smiling as he scratched his cheek as Haluan flushed and smiled. Deciding that it was best not to be out and, in her bra and underwear, she walked away for a moment and then returned to meet Belle again. This time she was wearing a rather large sweatshirt that went past her thighs and a bit long at the sleeves. However, did nothing to hide her curves and rather seemed to make her chest seem bigger. Thanks for worrying about me. Usually, it's height that's in a frantic while the others offer me like a sacrifice. But yeah, I have heard quite the tales from Hythe and from Lady Freya when she was finished and heard the reports from Otter and Haydeen. She said as she turned around to see her bed. Belle peeking over and saw Lily was shifting in the bed and wrapping herself more in the blankets, along from our newest familiar member bunking with me until we can find a place for her to move into. I'm surprised you were fine with her joining after what happened. Belle, she said, though wasn't angry or mad at him, as she smiled while Belle leaned against the door frame. Sorry we couldn't get you something we stole from Soma as compensation. We did get some of his bad wine batches and some treasures. Honestly, those bad batches taste better than his good one. And have you heard about our other 2 crew members from Lily last night? Belle asked as Haluan nodded and lightly clapped her hands. Yes, it's very sweet of you to help Philvis with her issue and helping her out in breaking her shell. And did you have to intentionally make Mr. Crozzo mad with buying his armor and calling him that name? She said with a pout as she poked at Belle's chest a few times. I was seeing what he would do or say. Plus, I had to point out he's a good smith but terrible with names and ideas for armor parts. But, while you're up and awake, do you think you want to come with us to the dungeon today? Or do something else with us? Belle asked as Haluan smiled but turned back to see Lily still sleeping. I'd love to, but sadly Lily won't join us. She mentioned last night that she wanted to collect some of her nest eggs she had scattered around Orario and bring them back here. Since she's part of our familia now, she thinks her money she's been saving will be safer here than her hiding places. Oddly, Otter seemed to offer to join her to make sure they were secure and safe while they would come back. Haluan said as they both watched as Lily tossed and turned, snoring as she hugged a pillow. Wow, thought Otter would have taken longer until he would play his fatherly role on Lily, but sad she isn't joining today. Oh, but that just means you can meet Philvis and Welf and get to know them firsthand. Besides, it feels like forever since we hanged out or talk, or even went to the dungeon together. Belle said as Haluan thought about it and realized he was right. Technically. True. All right, I'll join you. Let me just get ready. Haluan said as she closed the door. Belle grinned as he looked down at himself and hurried back into his room to get dressed and prepared for the dungeon. Meanwhile, inside Haluan was panicking and moving around clothes in her closet as to try and think of what to wear. At first, she thought to pick out her usual outfit, but felt that it would be repetitive and wouldn't do well for a first impression with her new party members, rather crew mates as Belle insisted on calling them a crew. I really need to do more shopping. I mostly have this in copies or other darker clothing. Why did I get this one? This shows more of my thighs and my side breast out in the open, Haluan said, blushing at one of her dresses that she got on a whim from Freya. Trouble finding something to impress Belle. A surly whisper blew into her ear as Haluan bit her lips and jumped, clutching to the dresser behind her and eyes widening at her goddess standing behind her. My lady. When did you get in? And please cover yourself, Haluan whispered, as she shut her eyes tightly and looked away, earing Freya to giggle as she wrapped her arms around her sweet child and nuzzled her cheeks together with hers, making Haluan blush at feeling her goddess's naked body. Oh, come now, Haluan. It's nothing you haven't seen before, Tilda. But Lily's dash, Haluan said as both she and her goddess turned to now Lily drooling on the pillow, giggling as she nuzzled into it and could hear her murmuring about Belle and something about fluffiness. Tilda quite the deep sleeper, isn't she? and I'm a bit envious how she looks so comfortable dreaming about our order. Freya said, biting her finger as she wished to dream. Many pleasantful dreams of Belle and Hulluin right now. Why you haven't answered me, Lady Freya? Oh, come now, sweetie. You have those secret passages leading to my room if I ever need your aid and help in work, or if I call for you. I have the spare keys for them. Freya said as she undid the ponytail she had as Hulluin watched her goddess's silver hair cascading down like a waterfall and saw she had keys in her fingers. But why come all of a sudden to my room? Well, at first I wanted to come snuggle with you again like we did during my latest episodes, Freya said, making Hulluin shiver in place as she crossed her legs over each other and whimpered. But then I had overheard you and our Belle talking, and he does bring up a point. I have been a bit selfish with you lately, and you haven't progressed with him at all. Despite the times you've been assisting with SYR. You and him rarely had any time together, Freya said as she giggled when she saw Hulluin pouting, patting her head as she then turned on her heels and sat back onto Hulluin's bed, crossing one leg over the other and leaned forward with her elbow resting on her smooth thigh and using her arm to rest her chin, giggling how Hulluin was bright red at the little sight she must have given her. So Tilda, now's a good opportunity to impress him, and from you opening the door for him, I'd say you gave him quite the good morning. Now, let's see what you should wear for him, Freya said as Hulluin whimpered and moaned a little as she turned away and began to pick out a few dresses and skirts she would think look nice. My lady, I know that Belle is your order, but I worry for the both of you, Hulluin said as she clenched a skirt in her hand when she pulled it out. Worried? Say, Belle ends up marrying SYR first, and that role is shared between me and you. What would happen when he asks where we are? We disappeared one day, fallen in the dungeon, Hulluin asked, shivering as she placed her hands on the dresser drawer. And then, if it's just you alone taking that role, what would happen when he learns that SYR can't bear any children of her own? He's so kind, and I doubt that even if you suggested him to sleep with me to carry your child, he would even try it. Shivering as she thought about Belle looking saddened and could imagine him pushing her away if they were alone in the bedroom after his and SYR's wedding. Freya stood up and walked behind Hulluin, slowly hugging the scared girl into her warm embrace, caressing her long silver hair as she turned around and hugged her, feeling tears falling on her breasts as her heart ached at her child's fear, kissing Hulluin atop her head as she pulled her away, wiping away her tears with her thumb. Hulluin, I've long realized since meeting Belle and my means to have my beloved in my heart, that I had made that bed I wished to lay with him forever, and no matter what outcome would happen when I reveal myself, I must lay in it, Freya said, surprising Hulluin as her eyes widened at her goddess. Why you would accept it? Even if worse comes he can't accept you. Why would you just accept it? Because I love him. If he hates me for lying to him, I won't blame him. If he breaks up with SYR and finds solace in you or another woman, I won't hate him for it. If he even wants to leave me, I'll undo the bind of his Falna, Freya said, briefly kissing Hulluin's forehead as she looked back into the confused and crying girl before her. I accept the ugly truths love has. Love has many forms, Hulluin, all of them mixed into this ideal and feeling of love. Fear, anger, jealousy, envy, happiness, lust. Every emotion, every feeling you can think or imagine, they are part of love itself. And that's why I can accept if Belle hates me for lying. It's part of love, Freya said as she rubbed a bit of tears that were leaking from her eyes and sniffled. Even us gods aren't immune to it. We're selfish beings that feel emotion as well. My lady, please, for your sake, our sake, tell Belle the truth. Not now, but if he ever asks, or when you feel it right. I know I'm not as close to him as myself, but from what I've seen, him with SYR and myself, he's just a sensitive and emotional child when it comes to things outside his familiarity, Hulluin said, hugging her goddess tightly as she buried herself into her chest, wrapping her arms around Freya's body and holding her shoulders. He's an idiot. He's our idiot. But I know he's dense about a few things, even things he doesn't realize. He never had any real parental love aside that excuse of a grandfather he had. He wasn't raised right, but it was enough to make him who he is. And he always seems to find the good in people. Even if they are bad, he stubbornly makes them change. And I don't want to see him change for the worse or Break if he learns this the hard way possible. She cried as Freya nodded, sitting back down on the bed as she looked up to Hulluin with tears falling from her eyes. I will. When the time is right, I'll explain everything to him. But promise me this, Hulluin. If he does break and hate me, and can no longer smile after I've told him, pick up the pieces. For me. Lady Freya. It's something that terrifies me even. But as I've said, I've made my bed and have to lay in it. He would hate me, but not you, Hulluin. Never could he hate you, because you were just following my orders and shifts. Be there for him if he breaks. Even if it's painful on my part. Be there to pick up the pieces in his heart and put them back together with your own hands. Freya said as she held onto Helen's hands, tracing them over with her thumbs as she felt them warm. Knock knock asterisk. Hulluin, are you getting ready? Sorry if I am. I just forgot to tell you where we're meeting up. With Welf and Filvis. Belle's voice rang behind her door as Freya and Hulluin became startled. They each looked back and forth from each other to the door as he knocked once again. Hey, are you decent? Do you mind if I open the dash? No please. Ow, WL, I am in the middle of dressing myself. Hulluin said as she ran up the door and pressed her hands against it, blushing as she looked back at Freya as she went under the bed with Lily and hid under the blankets, peeping over to look at what was happening and mouthing at her to say do not open the door. Sorry then. I was about to get dressed until I realized I never told you where we would meet them. It's fine. No need to apologize, you were just being considerate to tell me about this is all. My bad. WL, we're meeting them inside the guild like me and Lily did yesterday. There's something I wanted to check in from what I heard some of our other members were talking about this morning. I'll come back after I get ready to check on you, if you need time just say so and I can wait. Hulluin sighed as she smiled, feeling her heart rate slowing down after the sudden panic she felt him knocking at her door. Thank you, Belle. I shouldn't take long. All right then. As she pressed her ear against the door, she finally let out a sigh as she could no longer hear his footsteps and relaxed a bit, looking down as she did need to ready herself and look back to her goddess to tell her she would promise if the worst came to, she would be there to pick up the pieces. However, she was baffled at the sight of her goddess struggling and trying to pry herself from a sleeping Lily, now drooling and giggling while clinging to their naked goddess in bed. Freya looking mortified and staring at Hulluin with a blank face and lips sucked into her mouth. Hulluin, help me. I don't know how she's still asleep from our talk, but how does she have an iron grip? She said, groaning as Lily nuzzled into her breast and moaning while laughing a little in her sleep. Tilda Master Bell, I didn't know you felt so warm and hard Tilda like a pillowy soft brick Tilda. And your carrot Tilda gay he Tilda Hulluin blushed, and Freya pouted as they looked down at the sleeping Paulum, now nuzzling more and shifting her body against Freya's as she talked of Belle in her sleep. Lucky. Well, hurry and get ready for your day with Belle now, Hulluin. Don't keep him waiting. Freya said as she leaned over the bed to reach for an outfit Hulluin had set aside and tossed them to her, watching as she nearly fell over trying to catch them as Freya petted the Palum's head while she slept. Lady Freya, are you sure dash? Hulluin, I can see that you love him. Truly, love him as much as I do. No, perhaps even more than that. Don't let yourself hold your desires for him because of me and those fears you have. Freya said as she pointed to her, smiling as she combed her hands through Lily's hair. Let yourself experience how you truly wish to love Belle. Let loose and cherish your time with him, no matter how long you wish. Or even ask him out more often if you want to know more. Be a bit selfish, Hulluin. She said as Hulluin's grip on her clothes tightened, but smiled as she wiped the tears away from her eyes. Okay, thank you for letting me be selfish in love, Lady Freya. And, I promise, I won't leave his side. If he falls, then I'll be there every step of the way to pick up his heart. Hulluin said as Freya smiled, relaxing in the bed as she brought one arm over her head to rest it under. That's all I ask, Hulluin. Now, go on, Tilda. Better hurry up and change to walk alongside him to the guild together. But what about you and your situation? Him. Don't worry about it. I'll stay here and get out soon. I'm curious on what kind of dreams Otter's daughter has for our order. From the sounds of it, it appears the princess is having some rather sensational and raunchy dreams of our bunny Tilda. Just like that, Master Bell. Tilda pet Lily. Move your hands all over Lily's head, Tilda. Jay, just be sure to leave before she wakes up, Haluan said as she quickly got herself dressed in a black button-up shirt that showed off her chest well as they were tented by the fabric as she tucked it into her long purple skirt that reached to her mid-calves, to then quickly put on some black tight pants that hugged her legs well and adjusting her black-heeled boots as she went over to check her weapons and bags. I wonder if I can get a little bit of action if I whispered things to her ear. Lady Freya, Haluan whispered as she watched her goddess laughing as she relaxed in bed, with Lily now moving closer to her and even moaning out a little, while the two of them were arguing about Freya's choice to continue sleeping with Lily, along with Freya's opinion on Haluan's dress. They were unaware of what their conversations meant to Bel, now walking away from the door as he was puzzled and thought to himself of what he was able to hear from the door. What exactly were they talking about in there? What does SYR have to do with them? And what did they mean by shifts and something about a bay? He thought, trying to piece what he heard in his mind, though he had to wince his eyes at the imagination of SYR beating up a bear with her own hands and serving it to him. No, it can't be something like that. Haluan and Lady Freya have something with SYR. But what? Is it that it could be for Lady Freya to be afraid of something and accept it? Then there's something about her being selfish of Haluan, closing his eyes for a moment as he walked, until he relaxed his hands as they fell to his sides and focused on ahead. Thinking about it now, I shouldn't be surprised. Haluan is Lady Freya's attendant. Her work must be more demanding than I thought it would be. Even if Otter and Pops helps out, the work of a goddess having one of the largest familia isn't easy. And then there was Lady Freya's cycles she must have gone through that she needed to help. Bel thought, blushing as a shiver crawled up his spine, sniffling and checking to see if his nose was bleeding. Maybe Lady Freya admits that she's been taking much of her time with work instead of going into the dungeon mere. She did want us to spend more time and Haluan to get out of the manor. When we go out I can probably see what it is they were. Bel stopped his train of thought as he had his hand on his door. His fingers stretched out on the door before pressed hard against the wood and turned it into a fist. He sighed as he pressed his forehead against the door and closed his eyes, wincing as his eyes twitched and head felt heavy and yet light in his mind. No, I shouldn't pry too much into their personal business. If it's something private between them, then it's wrong for me to butt in, he said to himself, opening the door and entering his room, walking to the closet and opened it as he started to strip himself of his pajamas. Still, if it's about SYR, I'll try to look into what might be wrong with her. Even if it's an intrusion of SYR's privacy, I want to know if she's all right. I don't want to lose another one. Bel whispered to himself, pressing his hand against his scarred chest. As his hand traced over his large X-shaped scar, he didn't bother to clear away his tears and allowed them to fall for a while before getting dressed. A few minutes now passed as Haluan was waiting anxiously for Bel outside his door. Fideline, with her old hairband she would wear, oddly looking like something a maid would wear, but was oddly Chopin to actually look like small horns. Fiddling with her dress she kept on, instead of taking Freya's other suggestions and pressed on it to make it look nice. Though, added a small mesanga bag she wore around her shoulder. Did I get ready too fast? As should I knock and see if he dash? Slam. All right, that should ga. Haluan. Bel cried out as he first saw her outside his door, though couldn't keep his balance as he flailed his arms out and tried to stand back up. Sadly, he was now gravity's bitch and felt himself meeting the floor, with seeing Haluan's feet jumping away from him as he slammed onto the cold tile floor. Ow tilde. Oh my goddess, I'm so sorry about that, Bel. It's fine. Let's just call this karma for me accidentally scaring you this morning, Bel said, as he groaned while getting up off the floor. Haluan taking the time to see what he wore and was surprised that he wasn't wearing his usual adventuring garb and instead looked like some of his other clothes he used to go adventuring in or wore on his days off. That familiar outfit of his large button-up shirt, this time actually buttoned up. Silently. Thankful he did, but also annoyed he didn't reveal his chest. Black cargo shorts with his endless sky strapped to his back, him and pockets and pouches full of items. Black boots on his feet and that familiar odd orange hat with the smiling faces and red beads around it. All right, I take it you're ready to set off? Bel asked, adjusting a large backpack on his back, as he smiled and placed his hands on his hips, tilting his head as Haluan was still in awe at what he wore as he waved his hand in front of her face. Haluan. Why yes, I'm fine. But aren't we going in the dungeon? Why aren't you wearing any armor? Well, not to be rude, but you're not wearing much armor either. Come to think of it, I rarely see any adventurers with full armor sets or some that cover a lot of their bodies. Filvis doesn't wear armor and neither does Welf. And if you look at Amazons, then they hardly wear any dash. Okay, yeah, I see what you mean. But they do have magical defenses and protection. Spells casted on them. And where are we going if not the dungeon? Haluan asked as Bell shut his door and looked back to her smiling, with a hand on his hat and holding the strap of his backpack on his shoulders. Oh, we're going in the dungeon. It's just I thought it'd be more fun if we did a simple quest. That way we have fun while getting paid for a job and gives us time for you to meet everyone. Bell said as he continued to walk as Haluan followed his lead and walked next to him. That actually does sound nice. But you better take the quest seriously. If we mess up, we'll be in quite the predicament with the client. We might not get paid if we mess up. Haluan said as Bell laughed and saluted at Haluan. All right, guess we'll have to get whatever quest we pick done and done right to make the client happy. So, while we make it to the guild, tell me more about yourself, Haluan. Bell said, making Haluan nearly trip over and started to wave her arms around herself. Where did this come from? Well, truth be told, I really don't know much about you aside from what Pops, SYR, MIA and others tell me. Honestly, it's a bit embarrassing and I'm kinda ashamed at myself for not hearing more about you from your own mouth. Bell said as he rubbed the back of his neck, gazing at Haluan's revealed eye as her spine tingled and hair parted briefly when she met his gaze. If I'm gonna have you as part of my crew, and well, as my friend and with Pops and Freya. Joking, you'll be my wife, I want to learn more about you from you yourself. He smiled as she sucked in her lips and felt her stomach doing flips and heart practically wanting to burst from her chest and crawl up her throat. WWL, your father's and Lady Freya's jokes aside, what do you want to know first? She asked as she subtly moved closer to his side, feeling it even closer than before, but didn't see that he also moved next to her as their fingers were only a few centimeters from touching, and the fabric of Haluan's sleeve brushing his wrist. Maybe your favorite food. Are you just hungry? No. Well, we haven't had breakfast, but come on, it's a common thing to want to know. So, that way, if Mama MIA has me dragged back into her kitchen, I can make you something one day. Bell said as Haluan let out a giggle, making him smile more as she began to list off a few of her favorite foods. Watching her get embarrassed to her admitting love of fatty foods like large steaks marbled in it, or to the simplicity of fried chicken bits and breaded chicken, Caesar salads, and surprised her choice of desserts were pies. They made their way out of their home and continued to talk along the way to the guild, only stopping by for Hestia to meet them outside the hostess to give Belle and the party their meals and whip up some light breakfast jagamaris. Waving off to the short goddess and wishing her luck with work, they continued to talk as they ate. From there, Belle had learned more about Haluan than he had the past 4 months since arriving and joining Freya's. Each time she would tell him something about herself, filled his heart and made it swell, wanting to learn more and more, and wanting to see her smiling and laughing when she reacted to his distaste of sweets. He felt embarrassed when he admitted he can eat them, but the rather sweet ones like cherry pies or caramel apples made him twitch and make a face. Their talks continued on until they reached the guild, entering it and saw that Filvis and Welf were soon meeting up at the lounge, both smiling as they walked over towards them as they were perplexed who was standing next to him. Morning, Filvis, cherry boy. I told you not to call me that, damn it. Did you seduce your goddess yet? Or even talk to her since last night? Bell counted back at Welf as Filvis giggled as she sat down on the couch in the guild. He did not. I had heard him around earlier and his mutterings and grumbling of someone by the name of Tsubaki teasing him about his new name and taunting him about seeing his goddess, which means he didn't even so much as say goodbye or see her off before coming. Here. Damn it, Phil. Stop adding fuel to the fire. Welf screeched out as his face was red again while Filvis gave him a smirk as she rested her chin on her hand. See, I'll keep calling you that or other names I think up if you don't talk to her soon. Whatever. And where's Lil Lily? And who's this? Welf asked as he pointed to Haluan who waved hello to both of them, but only Filvis returned the gesture. Oh this, I thought I mentioned her to you both last night. But given how you can't hold your liquor, and given how you had a bit too much Filvis, I suppose a better introduction is in order. Bell said as Welf gritted his teeth and grumbled while Filvis had the decency to blush and have an apologetic smile on her face. This is our crewmate Haluan. Technically she's one of the first that joined my crew since coming here to Orario. Sadly, she's mostly our goddess's attendant and has a lot of work on her plate, so we haven't had the time to go dungeon diving as often. But hopefully she'll be joining us more often now. Bell said as Haluan bowed at them and smiled. It's a pleasure to meet you all. I've heard quite good things from Lily and Bell about you, and I hope to get to know you better and do well in the dungeon with you. Likewise, Miss Haluan. I'm always looking forward to meeting others, Filvis said, blushing, as she was nervous to make another friend, but smiling as she felt this was another test for her to break her out of her shell and looked determined to be friends with Haluan. Nice to meet you, Elin. But where's Lily run off to? She late or something? Welf asked, as the other two girls looked at him with dull stares and sighs escaping their lips. Mr. Welf, you need to be considerate when addressing a lady, along with those names of yours, Filvis said as she shook her head as Bell and Haluan crossed their arms and nodded, earning Welf to look baffled at Filvis and back to both of them. Hey, wait, what? What did I do? Come on, cherry boy. Remember how I said you need to come up with better names? The nicknames you're giving to the girls sound bad. I wonder what would happen if you decided to give Faye a nickname on your own. I think she would be silent with tears. Bell, given a horrible nickname from her love. How tragic, Haluan said, wiping away a fake tear from her eyes. What's wrong with my nicknames for you guys? Well, mine sounds like a man's name. Haluan's just now sounds a botched name pronunciation. It sounds like you're trying to say Ether Allen or Ella. And Lily's is somewhat poking about her height. Filvis listed off with her fingers showing the number of issues Welf's nicknames have. And I'm pretty sure if you gave me a nickname, I'd be pissed. Odds are it'd be something to do with rabbit or something similar, Bell said, growling at the thought before he felt Haluan patting his back, soothing him slightly. Well, I don't see what's wrong with giving us nicknames. There's something as a means to connect with comrades. But I don't see you giving better nicknames. And mine is terrible. What nickname would you give to yourselves? Welf said as he pointed at all of them as they crossed their arms and looked up in thought. I would probably call myself Cholla. It's cute and part of my family name. Filvis said. I don't have a family name, but I have been called Horn as a nickname in my familia, given I have these. And it's sorta cute, Haluan said as she pointed to her headband, and blushed. Well, shit, this is hard. I have plenty of nicknames outside Orario and through my travels. But, let's see Tilda if it's by my name alone. I'd call myself, nah. My name's fine on its own for a nickname, Bell said, sighing as he couldn't think of a nickname for himself. This time, being patted by Filvis and Haluan. See, at least one of you can't come up with a nickname for yourself. I would, well, fuck. This is harder than I thought. Welf said, looking down as he couldn't think of a nickname for Bell that doesn't include something relating to rabbit. Okay, I admit it. For you, coming up with a nickname is hard. But I bet you all can't think of a better name for dash. Cross, Filvis said. Red Wolf. Haluan looked at him with a deadpan expression. Zolo, Bell said, picking his ear as all three of them looked at him confused. Wait, Mr. Bell, why that name? That actually sounds like a good one. But too good for Mr. Welf, Filvis said in astonish. Hey. Well, take a look how his name is spelled. And you can arrange or remove some letters. Zolo is one of them. Another one similar is Zorro. Then there could be names like Welcro, Clef, Rox, and some others as well. Bell explained as Welf's eyes widened and Haluan was applauding Bell. Yes, call me that. Call me Zolo or Zorro, Welf said excitedly. No one are never. Haluan, Bell, and Filvis said as they waved their hands at Welf as he fell over on his chair and collapsed on the ground. But why dash? Well, nicknames aside, who's ready for an adventure? Bell said, ignoring Welf's plea as they followed him to go over to the reception desk, looking as Aina was finished with assisting another adventurer and then looked at their small party, watching her sigh as she leaned against the counter and looked bored at Bell. What have you come here for this time, Bell? If it's to annoy me and give me a headache, you're too late for that. I'm stuck with the paperwork my boss gave me and I have a few letters from my mother I have to read later today and write back to her. Aina said as Bell waved his hands at her. Now nothing like that. You'll be surprised that we're not doing something stupid. Well, stupid in your definition at least. Bell said, surprising Aina as she grabbed onto his collar and looked at him in surprise. You're not. Don't you lie to me, young man. You're actually being responsible. If this is a joke, I will come over this counter and choke the shit out of you and beat your ass. Aina yelled at him as he clenched his teeth as he grabbed her by the collar, hearing her squeak out as she unintentionally released her hold. I'm not joking, damn it. We're just gonna get a quest and need your approval on it. But first, there's something I want to know. Bell said as he pushed her back down and saw her fixing herself, adjusting her glasses as she cleared her throat. Well then, what do you want to know? Aina asked as Bell placed his hands on the counter and leaned closer. What do you know about some investigations going on the dungeon? He asked as Aina looked around cautiously and motioned the others to come closer, waiting for them to huddle in before she covered the sides of her mouths and looked at them worryingly. Where did you hear about that? Independent Maine and Bell had heard some of our familiar members talking as we were leaving the manor. What we've heard is that there's been a recent case of some missing adventurers and items disappearing in the dungeon's depths. Haluan said as Aina looked around and motioned them to follow her. They followed Aina over to the quest board and pointed out to some of the requests that have been marked off, pulling them down as she sat down to one of the nearby resting areas as she placed the requests on the small table in front of her. While I don't want to admit it, we've noticed some adventurers and their items have gone missing. Yesterday, a party went down to the 24th floor for a simple mineral gathering quest, collecting the amount requested and return. Reports on the 18th floor had given us that 3 party members went missing and their gear wasn't recovered. Aina said as she set the quest. She explained aside and moved on to the others. Another one at the same time and later reported was a monster hunt request, killing a few high poison moths and bring back their wings or acid in vials. A 2-party team went on this and came back to the 18th floor. They said something was hunting them and robbed their belongings after killing some of the poison moths. Interesting. So there's something hunting for adventurers or their gear at least. Have there been anything else in common aside quest requests so far? Floor levels or injuries on the adventurers? Philvis said as Bell grabbed one of the quest and looked over some of the others. They are scattered on the floors. The first one was the 24th, but the moth one was on floor 21. Then it just scatters on similar floors, but this last one, was it reported in this morning? Bell said as he pointed out the one he had in hand. Aina nodded as Bell leered down at the paper. Floor 24, then 21, suddenly back to the 25th floor and 26th. And this latest one, it's at floor 19. Whatever is causing these disappearances, or worse, is moving around at random floors. Bell reasoned as Aina nodded in agreement. Exactly. So far we're urging any high-class adventurers and above to take caution when proceeding past the 18th floor. That should include your party as well. You have Philvis who's a level 3, Haluan and you yourself are level 2, and Mr. Crozzo and Miss Lily are level 1. Aina explained. Do you have an investigation team looking into the dungeon and finding out what's causing this at least? If they can't find the reason, then it's going to cause some issues with the guild and adventurers. Welf asked as Aina nodded. We have Ganesh's Familia joining in with some of our adventuring guild staff in the dungeon, as well as some members that Loki was willing to spare to help investigation. We haven't gotten any reports back, but that's expected since they set off only an hour ago. Aina said as she and the others got up from their seats and handed her back the quest flyers. Well, good thing I decided we take it easy and do a quest on one of the floors we've been to before. But why not contact our goddess for any assistance? Bell asked as he was tapped on his shoulder by Haluan. Sadly, Bell, Lady Freya, and the others are busy with other work. While we're in exploration Familia, we also have plenty of businesses we run and do shipping and trading with others. Outside Orario, our members often have to act as escort and protection. Haluan said as Bell blinked and looked at her. So that's why you all are often busy. Aside the dungeon work, we're also meant to do escort and bodyguard work. How many businesses do we have? Quite a few, but we do cater to do good business, and that does lead us to our lesser members being quite busy and need help. Huluan explained. Well, that explains a bit. But I suppose this is for the best. Sadly, until this issue is at least solved or at best, gotten rid of and cleared by the guild, we're not risking going further down. Unless needed. Bell said, looking at them all with a serious gaze in his eye. He's taking this hard. All of them aside Aina thought as they could see it in his eyes that he was struggling to accept this fact. But he had no choice as they could tell he was acting like their leader of the group and needed to do what was best. Perfect. There are plenty of quests that are located at the upper dungeon levels and some that are simple job requests. Once you've picked one, just call for me and I can sign you off. Aina said as she organized the papers in hand and happily skipped back to behind the counter. All blinking as they swore they saw a warm aura around her and flowers coming off her. Hey, oddly that's kinda cute. Bell murmured under his breath at the sight of Aina skipping merrily to her job as he looked around at the request board and blinked, noticing one quest. As he took it off the board and smiled. Hey, guess they came up with some decent reward or cash to post a quest then. Say guys, how does a material gather quest sound? Bell said as he held up the paper and showed them. The request being for a few monsters drops and drool from monster ants and poison moth. Scales. Interesting, and it's around the 10th floor. That's not so bad. Welf commented as Philvis squinted her eyes as she saw the reward in question. But that doesn't seem enough for us to collect on the reward. It's only a large set of mana and health potions and 3 dragon scales. And this familiar that requested it, Mayak Familia, they were able to submit a quest. Huluan asked as Bell laughed. Yeah, guess they are doing decent enough to post some jobs. But they are good people and I promised them and Hestia I'd help them out if they needed it. They were the ones that really saved me in my earlier days here. Bell said as he rolled up the quest flyer. They did. Yup. Even though their potions were lower quality, they saved me a few times when I needed them in the dungeon. Though I had to scold their captains as about trying to rip off on their potions' quality, I did teach them better methods to making them. Guess my teachings helped them make some decent Valis. So, we're helping a familiar that ripped you off for little pay. 1. It was only their captain and only member. Not their god, his chill. 2. Who says we have to stop there? We kill monsters along the way, take the stone and Valis and whatever drops they give. And when we get there, we set the items needed for them and cash out our drops and turn the quest items in. Bell said looking at Welf who was questioning why they would take the quest. He does have a point. We don't have to go straight for the job request. Philvis said as Bell whacked Welf up the head with the request flyer. See, not everyone is as skeptical as you, cherry boy. I'll be right back. Why are we doing this for someone sketchy? And stop calling me that. Well, Bell did take you into the crew and your names for the armor and weapons are sketchy already. Huluan does have a point. I'll see if the shop has any antidotes for poison. Philvis said as she and Huluan left Welf alone to sigh in his seat as he was now stuck waiting for Bell and the others, rubbing his eyes as he looked up to the ceiling and smiled. Really odd group I joined with, but I will get them to call me something else aside that stupid nickname. Experience in the ways of family, romance, and fire in the heart. Experience in the ways of family, romance, and fire in the heart. Monstrous thuds echoed in the deep floors of the dungeon. Clashing steel sparked and lit the dark dungeon floor. The sparks illuminating the 2 combatants' face briefly. One of them being Ace herself. A bored expression on her face as she battled her opponent and flung one of the weapons away and parried the other that struck at her. The other opponent was a gigantic beast compared to her 5 feet 4 inches height. It was 9, possibly, standing at 10 feet tall. Its skin different from the usual color of its species she's killed and faced before. Its body was red like blood, with its chest and arms black with cracked and spider-like veins at its arms. The beast's twin horns were large and oddly colored, one being black that shined like obsidian, and the other being a glowing red. It snarled as it drew another weapon from its makeshift belt around its hip, littered and holstering vast smaller weapons around it. From daggers to swords, hammers and axes, to on his back carrying a broadsword. In its hand, it growled as it had to discard another weapon, a broken golden axe. While the other weapon was already cracking, a dagger, from now clashing against A's sword. A's saw the dagger as she palmed against the dagger's hilt, watching it break as she backed away, and raised her sword and aimed it at the monster. wind swirling around her body as she was encased in green aura and wind blowing against her hair. Her eyes leered as she watched the monster grab the broadsword from its back and a hammer from its hip, seeing the weapons crackling with fire and lightning as it roared at her. Lil Raffiga, Ace whispered as she took a single step forward and now faced the opposite side of the dungeon's walls. The wind howling and the monster's roar echoed in the floor. She heard a loud thud and the clanging of metal falling. Looking at her own sword, she slashed it away and saw the blood splattering on the floor before she was about to return it to her sheath. Wait, my arm. It's stunned, she thought as she felt numbness in her arm holding her sword. Looking at how it twitched and her muscles briefly spasmed and tingled. Cheering back to see the monster, a smile graced her lips as she saw it bleeding. But not dead. It looked as though another attack could kill it, but it was on its knees and still alive. Impressive. To withstand my Lil Raffiga is truly impressive for a beast, she said as she took out her sword again and walked over to the beast, pointing the tip at its forehead as it looked up to her and growled, "One more attack, and you'll be nothing but ashes in the wind. But I can't have you dying now," she said as she sheathed her sword finally before walking past the injured monster. The clacking of her heels and armor echoed the dungeon for a while as she was heading to the tunnel leading to the upper level. She paused as the beast looked at her back, her golden blonde hair swaying as she looked back to it with her eyes leered, and that same smirk on her face. "You will not die here to me. You can only die to the one I deem worthy to kill you. The one I tend to make amends for my failures of understanding people. Your weapons you collected from the fallen and dead adventurers in the deep floors, whatever you find, I just hope it's enough to help you. Only he can kill you, that boy with white hair and red eyes, like a rabbit," Ace said before she disappeared into the tunnel's darkness, leaving the monster to look at its weapons down on the floor, seeing its own reflection as it clutched the dungeon floor, clawing it as it let out a roar loud enough to shake the dungeon and rubble to fall. Hayden Selland was, and is, a man of patience. He had grown accustomed to the sheer idiocy and stupid rivalry of his familia since he first joined many years ago, having to deal with the stupidity of the Gulliver brother, Alan's devotion to Lady Freya, and even his so-called brother's habits and stupidity with revelry in darkness. That patience of his only grew increasingly well, since Cranel came into his life. Or, rather, forcibly came into his life since he joined, from causing much more of a headache with Alan, to now sparking a feud or odd and horrifying image of love between Alfred and Alan, the sheer and utter chaos of joining his brother with his antics, to which, now the sheer complications of his love life and relationship now with Riveria and the royal family. Some would call his patience godly. However, that all seemed to snap after a few days since his return from his quest with his little crew, when it was brought up to him by Philvis that he seek to learn and practice his magic to better understand and use it, along with perhaps testing it with his weaponware. His newest crew member Welf pointed out that there was an oddity within it. Bringing these up to him, Hayden thought that it would be nice to teach him something else, aside elf mannerisms and culture, along with taking a break from his usual dungeon dives, and overseeing the dozens of marriage requests. Yet, it was then a suggestion came from Bell that seemed to have broken his patience and possibly sanity, as now, many of the executives of Freya's Familia, along with Lily and Hulluan, looking in a panic as they saw the father and son practically rolling about on the floor in a feud. Like hell you will. Of all the stupidity I've put up with through my years in Orario, this has to be the biggest. How the hell can you be so stubborn about this, Pops? You're the reasonable one here. Stop taking my job to be an idiot. I'm your son. I'm allowed to be stubborn and stupid since I'm still young. And if I'm your father, then that means you've taken my stubbornness about this proposal. I won't allow it. I refuse you to even step foot into that place. Hayden roared as he was tackled again by Bell as they struggled, and he managed to grab him around his head and tighten his hold to not let him escape. "Mr. Hayden, please see reason. While you yourself can do this, I believe with Lady Reveria's aid there can come a better understanding to Master Bel's magic. Lily cried out as she and Haluan tried to get close to the father and son. Even if you don't like it, it'll only just be a few days before she and her familia have to depart to the dungeon. You can tolerate a few days, can't you? Haluan asked as Hayden paused from his hold on Bel to look up to the attendant. Never. See Simon. P-Pops, it's only for a bit. Besides, it's not like we have a choice unless we want to get ransacked by Granny. Bel chopped out as Hayden released his hold, making Bel instantly slamming his head on the tiled floor as Haluan and Lily went to check on his head and rested on their laps together, making Hythe roll her eyes as she moved his hair to see if there was any bumps. Explain now, you idiot. What do you mean ransacked? Hayden said as he was getting off the floor as Bel pulled out a letter from his pocket, holding it up above him as Borling took it from his hand and inspected it, his brothers joining in as they looked back and forth from the letter to Bel then Hayden. I don't get it. This just says that your grandma is asking you to go see Reveria for some tips and magic lessons and hand this letter to her if she refuses, along with her visiting soon if she doesn't hear anything from you or that elf. Greer said as Hayden's eyes blinked and snatched the letter away from Borling's hands before the others could look at it themselves. Wait a second, she'd be coming here. Yeah, Pops, so unless we want to risk our home to suffer like Loki's when she visited her to see us, just tolerate it for now until she leaves. Bel said, watching the troubling face Hayden was making as he paced back and forth a few times while clutching the letter in hand. Is this really necessary? She sent a letter to her as well. She's waiting at least a week for her and me to write back how the lessons are going. Granny wants us to have some family time and to better get to know each other. Bel answered as all watched Hayden take a deep sigh, his arms dangling, and slouched over, shoulders slumped as he let the letter fall from his hands and his glasses dropped a little. Get ready, we're going to your mother's for a bit. He chopped out as he turned away and hobbled to his room, all looking at him with saddened looks and some even praying at his figure now growing smaller off in the distance. Yeesh, brother does not look too well to have to go. They're gonna have to tolerate each other for your sake, nephew. Hogney said as Bel sighed, wanting to get up from his makeshift pillow of Lily and Haluan's lap, only for him to be dragged down by both of them as they placed their hands on his head and set him back down. Lily, Haluan, mind letting me go? I need to check on Pops so he's not wallowing in despair or anger to visit Ma. Bel said as he felt his hair petted and chest patted on by the girls. Master Bel, it would be wise to just let Mr. Hayden compose himself on his own. Besides, you're already set to go and visit Lady Reveria. Lily said, though leering her eyes at Haluan, who subtly shifted his head more to her lap. I doubt wearing pants, boots, and my yellow button-up and orange hat constitutes proper attire for magic training. What if I explode or cause a fire onto myself and burn my clothes? So far my track record of melted and ruined and burnt clothes isn't the best. Bel said, recalling the times his clothes were soaked in blood or got ripped, and in Monsterphilia how his clothes melted away leaving him exposed. Haluan, Lily, you both have magic, right? Hythe, you and Uncle are more proficient in it. Mind giving me some tips what I might be doing with Ma? Bel said, getting up much to the girls' dismay as he stretched out his limbs and looked at the two of them. That's a bit difficult to say, dear nephew. Magic is unique to the user itself. And with your magic it might be more difficult to understand or grasp in the first day. The only reason you can do magic like last time in the dungeon was probably because it was unlocked as a usable spell for you already. Hogney thought as Hythe went to Bel and inspected his hands and eyes. Hogney's right in that regard. Your magic is, well, odd and the drawback is likely to be risky for you. But from Lady Reveria, I'd assume she'd be getting you to meditate and learn about the flow of mana into your body to better accumulate and control your magic. Flow of mana. Magic requires mana, which resides in everything, even in the air. Our bodies absorbed it, even if we don't know it. But for adventurers we have the capability to draw in mana and use it to use our magic and spells. Though, there's a limit to what each race can do with said mana and hence leads to mind down if overused too much. She explained as she then poked at Bel's chest as he looked down at her finger, before feeling his nose swatted up by her finger as she laughed. Hey, still, this flow thing. It's kinda sounds familiar to me. Bell muttered as he rubbed his nose and looked deep in thought as Hythe patted his head. Maybe you might have heard it somewhere or read it, but maybe that's what you'll most likely learn today from your dear old mom and dad. Hythe said as Bell tilted his head in confusion and crossed his arms. Mom and dad. Huh? What? Bell asked, confused by her words and everyone's reaction to him when he questioned her. Your pops and ma, stupid rabbit. They're your mom and dad in this sense. What, you? Don't see them as your real parents? Alan snarled as Bell looked at him with a light glare, though there was question and confusion in Bell's eyes. Of course Pops is like my parents, stupid Alan, but I never had parents before. All I heard is how parents are supposed to be. And well, Pops is like one to me and maybe Reveria. Depends how she feels about it. Bell admitted as that earned many to widen their eyes and even have Helluin and Lily cover their lips with their fingers. Bell, wait. Can you clarify something for us? Dvalin said, stepping forward with his hands out waving to Bell as he looked at him. Okay. When you said you never had parents, did you mean that you don't remember them? Or, rather, did you not have anyone with you? A mom? A dad? A caretaker at least? Dvalin said as a few seconds passed by before Bell looked at him wide-eyed and lightly hit his palm with his fist. Okay, so he understands what we were asking. Well, I had my shitty gramps, but he never talked about them at all. Even when I used to ask about them, he'd have this sad, faraway look in his eyes when I mentioned it. Often enough, he'd come up with some reason not to tell me, like his going out to drink with some friends or peep at women. Bell said, not noticing the angry emotions and saddened feelings of the others. There was one time he took me to a hot spring when I asked. I hadn't been to one before, so I kinda bought into it and forgot why I asked. But then I got mad since we were forced out of there due to his perverseness. Bell said, adding fuel to the fire with the girls, including Hythe. Though I know I came from someone, but I don't even remember their names. Come to think of it, I can't even remember their faces or voice at all. Bell said with a straight face as he crossed his arms once more, looking up at the ceiling for a few seconds before grinning. Ah well, not like it matters much about where I came from anyways. Plus, why worry about who was my mom and dad? I have Pops and Reveria now, plus a granny and a better granddad than my old one, so I'm not too sad about it, he said, laughing as he compared his old grandpa to his new one and did prefer his new grandpa more and realized how an idiot his old one was. Isn't it a bit sad to compare your grandparents? Gra questioned as Bell waved his hands. Nah, believe me, if you'd meet my shitty gramps you would no doubt say he's the biggest moron, and question how he was alive after all the pervert stuff he did. I can fix that if he was here. Lily, Hythe and Helluin thought, glaring at the missing image of Bell's grandfather and imagining him to be a complete ass and bastard waiting to be put out of his misery. Plus, he'd probably be annoying me with what I've been doing in my travels, especially if he found out what I was doing for that year in different countries and meet so many different people. Bell said, sighing as he could feel the jealousy and annoyance of his old grandpa. Wait, Lily does recall you telling a bit about your journey when we celebrated Miss Filvis and Mr. Crozzo's joining to our crew, but never told us the rest of it. Lily called out as all looked back at her as she was now trying to remember more of what Bell said. Come to think of it, when you and Welf were arguing with nicknames, you did mention you were called a bunch of different names and titles when you were out of Orario and in your travels. Why is it you haven't talked about your journeys? Helluin asked as Bell shrugged his shoulders. Well, you never asked. And before you say Lily, for the party I wanted us to get to know Filvis and Welf. It wasn't a time for me to talk about myself. Plus, I never think about it. I don't want to talk and sound like an ass like Alan and have a fat ego. Bell said as all but Alan nodded at his reasoning to not talk about himself. While Lily understands not wanting to talk about yourself a lot, you have to at least tell us something. Is it going to be startling on what you told us at that time? What did he tell you? Otter asked as all looked to Lily as she shivered. Master Bell told how he accidentally entered a royal palace in the country of Asia and mistakenly entered an emperor's palace where he kept his concubines. Lily said, making the men look at her and Bell with widened eyes and Helluin blush. You accidentally entered a palace with concubines. Nice Tilda. Hythe said, impressed by this event. Don't say that, Hythe. It's baffling. More baffling that no one noticed he was in there for 3 days and entertaining one of the Emperor's highest consorts, Lady Gyokuyu, and entertained her and her special lady-in-waiting. Lily exclaimed, as now Hogni and the Gulliver brothers were kneeling at Belle's feet. This is getting better by the second. Stop that. Stop enjoying this. Lily shouted as Belle laughed at their reactions. Well, yeah, my adventures were some of the best times I've had when traveling. Honestly, things were even crazier. Though I worry for your sanity if I tell more of my travels at this point, Lily. Belle said as he scratched his cheek while Lily pouted and crossed her arms. I doubt that you've been through other odd adventures than that mishap with the Emperor's concubines, Master Belle. I can handle any other tales of dash. I briefly became a woman for a while when I was in the country of Japan, where I had met my teacher in the ways of understanding romance. Belle said, all too happily and with a smile on his face, watching as all of them freezing up and looking baffled and blushing. Excuse me. I think we might have heard you wrong, but dash. Nope. You heard right, Otter. I was a woman for a short time. Now, to be fair, it was an accident with one of my teacher's experiments and aiding in to help her follower understand about love. Belle explained, getting nods from Otter and Hythe as it was unintentional. Accident or not, how did this happen? Hogni yelled in a panic as he shook Belle by his shoulders back and forth, crying and looking scarred as he sobbed at his nephew who was smiling and didn't have a care in the world. Were you okay with that? Did anyone embarrass you or taunt you? Did anyone touch you when you didn't like it? Hogni cried as that made Otter flinch, looking over to Lily for a moment before his attention was brought back to Belle and a scowl came on his face at the thought of someone inappropriately touching someone else. Relax, uncle. Besides, I was fine with it, and my teacher helped with any issues I had. Sure, there was some people mocking that I'd be a woman forever or call me names and insults about my sex, but honestly it didn't faze me. Belle said, calming Hogni down as he sat on the floor and resting a hand over his heart and taking in a few deep breaths as Hythe patted his back. So, what was it like being a woman? Alfred asked, as the men and even Huluan blushed at the question. Honestly, it was pretty enlightening and gave me a whole different perspective of things. From a woman's point of view, it felt odd with how short I became and had to get used to the size difference. Not to mention the loss of, well, mini-me down there. Being a girl was somewhat a refreshing experience and taught me how rough women had it and how love of the opposite gender felt. Belle admitted as he smiled and blushed a bit at recalling his memory, though the others had to cross their legs or flinch at the idea of losing their manhood, even if it was temporary. They felt some relief for Belle as it didn't appear he had a difficult time in experiencing what it was like to become the opposite sex. Smiles and curiosity graced their faces at Belle's expression of when he told his odd tale of experience. Interesting. Mind sharing some things you learned or felt when being a girl? And what were you like anyways? Did you change a lot or hardly at all? Hythe questioned as Belle began to think and placed his fist under his chin. No, I didn't really change, I guess. I think just picture my face rounder and softer, and more feminine looking. I was shorter than I am, give or take a couple inches, though to my teacher, she said I was curvy and still somewhat boyish in my looks. Hey, odd. If I put a dress on you now, then I can kinda see it. I'd be flattered and would try one, but there's some issues with that. Belle said as Hythe quirked an eyebrow before her eyes widened. Oh, still a bit more masculine and not much feminine since your little change then? She asked as Belle shook his head. Not exactly. While I can be feminine if I choose, I prefer being myself and me still, if that makes sense. Yeah, it does. It's your preference. But what would be the issue? Silence ensued as Belle looked away and sighed, having an odd look on his face that seemed to be despair mixed in with a saddened smile. Well, for one thing, the outfit has to either have tight pants or a long skirt on to hide it. And, two, if I turned into a woman again, it needs to be big in the chest area so I can breathe right. Belle said as Hythe, Huluan, and Lily's eyes widened at the last part and the guys blushed and either turned away or covered their ears. Alan did both. The chest. And hide, that if you were to dress up as you are now? Huluan asked as she looked up and down at Belle, until her eyes focused on his chest and looked down at her own. Lily by this point was teetering and on the verge of fainting, with Otter on standby to catch her. All the while Hythe was in awe and whistled as she crossed her arms and looked up and down at him. So, you got a big carrot downstairs and some fluffy sweater puppies when you turn into a girl. Damn, guess your carrot goes straight to your puppies when you turn. Yeah, that's one way my teacher commented it when I turned. Though it's not all cracked up. To be for guys to think that bigger is better. Your back hurts, and depending on your height, you can feel them heavy and then it's soreness that gets to your lower back and feet. Belle listed off as height side and had her hands on her hips. Gods, I know what you mean. I heard that even some girls that have them bigger say that. Finding a dress is hell if they have it set in a fixed style around the chest, or even at the rear. And since it's pushing more into you. Exactly. Thank God Japan had more variety and open clothing options for women and men. I was embarrassed the first few times changing to yukatas or kimonos there since they are more free and they didn't exactly tell me if I was supposed to wear anything underneath them. But they helped so much than to some of the dresses my teacher had me try on. European dresses are the absolute worst for women with size issues on their chest. Belle said, as he and Hythe went back and forth on the issues of girls having with dresses. Going on for minutes as the others felt embarrassed about hearing these issues coming from Belle and Hythe and going at it. Eventually it went from makeup differences and Belle's routine, when he was a girl, diets and exercises, till eventually it had to be stopped when the topic of romance and sex came up. So as a girl, did you ever went on dates with any guys there that flirted with you? From what I'm hearing you could have had quite the harem of guys Tilda. Tilda, well, I dated maybe. Yeah, I went out with one of them for a week. But it was more or less practice for him on preparing to engage with his fiancée. Still, he was a sweet guy. I wouldn't mind dating him if he was single. He was also bi. Oh Tilda, that sucks. But if you did and you two got serious, would you have been willing to? GAHHH. Oh okay. I think we get it. There's no need to ask any more questions. About Belle's time in Japan and the days and weeks he's been a woman. Haluan said, butting in. And getting in between the two as her face was flustered. Actually, it was only a month. My teacher finally fixed the potion brew and made an antidote for it and turned me back the next day. That's short. It felt longer from what you and Hythe were talking about. Borling shouted in astonishment as Belle rubbed the back of his neck and awkwardly laughed. Well, my teacher kinda rushed me through some of the things girls experience. Since she herself didn't know how long the effect would be until she had some of her children examine me with magic and make up an antidote during my period of being a girl. Just who in the world was this woman to make you go through being a girl for a month? And to make it even seem pleasant even. Oh, her name's Aphrodite. Though she has me call her nicknames like Frofro or Aphie. Her favorite is me calling her Auntie Aphie. Belle said happily as silence ensued once more. This time with jaws hanging and looking at him wide-eyed to the point their tongues and eyes would look like they were falling out of their skulls. Aphrodite, the goddess that constantly fights with the big three virgin goddesses of the world. The goddess that's even rumored to be on pair with Ishtar and our own Lady Freya in terms of being the goddess of love. Alan shouted in disbelief as he rushed towards Belle and shook him. Yeah, that's my teacher. How the hell did you not mention this? Also, why in the fuck aren't you in her familia? You said you had trouble finding one. Couldn't you just write a letter, ask to join her, then get Falna from her? He shouted as Belle pulled away from Alan and dusted himself off. I could have, but I didn't. I wasn't gonna have her and her familia move to Orario just for my sake. Plus, she's the one that encouraged me to go to Orario when I talked about my shitty old man's last wish. She was all, you better get your butt to Orario soon after you're done here. You can't be cooped up in one place. You're a boy with gusto and wanting romance in his life. So better be on your own terms and not stuck here because of me. Get on out there and have a romance of adventure and find that special romance that will last you for all your lifetimes. Belle said in a childish girl voice as to imitate the goddesses of love's telling him to get out into the world. Hey, who knew she'd have a parental side to her? Given rumors, she fights off one of the three virgin goddesses constantly to make them interested into romance and love. Otter said as Belle's ears perked at that. Oh Tilda, you're talking about Artemis. Yeah, Aphie's been trying to get her to see at least some value on love. But from the stories I heard, she's a stubborn one. Belle said, blinking a few times as he looked to his back and saw nothing but the empty hallway and part of the lounge room they were in. Speaking of which, where's Pops? It's been a while and it shouldn't have taken him this long. to get some things from his room. Belle said as the others blinked and looked back to the hallway. Maybe. Brothers taking some time to cope with visiting Riveria. Hogni said, looking to Belle as their eyes meet and widened. Uncle, get a battering ram. No wait. Otter, we need your help. Pops is trying to barricade him inside his room. Belle screeched as Hogni began to push Otter from behind as now both men were running down the hall to reach Hayden's room. He's seriously barricading himself in to avoid going to Loki's. Alan said in a disappointing tone. You'd probably barricade yourself if what Laruka and the others did to you from your little victory from our bet at Soma's. Though this time, I want you to imagine if Sekhmet and Reiku actually went all out and got the other things to use on you. Belle retorted back, as all looked at Alan as he went into a fetal position on the floor and started shivering. I'll be back later after my magic lessons with Ma and hopefully making some progress. Belle said as he turned to the hallway and began to walk. Progress in your lessons in magic. Or progress with Riveria and Hayden. That too. And if you guys want, I can still tell some other stories of my travels later on if you'd like. Belle offered as Huluan blushed and looked away while Lily fainted and caught by Borling and Greer. I think that we've had our fill on your stories for today, kid. Looks like Lily is gonna need to process everything. And we need to clear our heads a bit. That was some shit you went through. Dvalin said as Belle turned back and gave them a thumbs up. Understandable. That experience isn't for everyone, and I won't judge. I'll give a fair warning next time if it might seem odd or surprising for you all to listen. Be back soon. And try to fix Lily. Belle said, now running off to reach the sounds of wood breaking and violent screeching and gibberish as lightning crackled ahead of him. I think, for our sakes and Belle's, we don't mention this story to Lady Freya. Agreed. Hogni said, earning many head nods and mutters of agreement. Especially from Huluan, who was having a bit of a crisis in her head. Belle as a woman, gods, why can I see that? I mean, he's cute and charming already. But, as a girl he'd be cute. And, his mention of his, and as a girl how big her, God. Lady. Freya Tilda, why have you corrupted me so and sullied my purity? If she finds out, then me and Belle will suffer the worst from her. Her frantic thoughts running in panic as she shivered in a mix of odd delight, though mostly in fear at the imaginings of what Freya would do to both of them when she learned of this, unconsciously crossing her legs slightly and covering her rear end. After some struggling and force from Otter and Hogni, Belle could be seen dragging Hayden down the road to Loki's familiar manor. Belle would be honest in the fact he felt weird about this situation he was in, mainly being the reasonable and responsible one for now, as he had to drag Hayden by the back of his collar as his body sagged and was dragging against the floor. Normally it's supposed to be me that looks like a mess when I'm dragged away, Pops. You better at least clean yourself off when you stand back up. Shut up. I hate this and you know that. Hayden barked as Belle shook his head and saw the gates of Loki's manor ahead, along with the two guards that looked at him in odd and baffled, as they had to adjust their eyes. You don't hate this. You just hate having to see Ma. Can't you at least learn to tolerate each other? If not for your own sake, then at least for mine and Granny. Belle said as he walked past the startled guards, hearing Hayden sigh as he stopped Belle and stood back up, dusting himself as he walked next to him with a scowl on his face and adjusting his staff sword in hand. I promise nothing but to at least try. Thanks, Pops. Now, to let the chaos ensue. Belle muttered as they both stepped in the front of the door, cracking his knuckles as he raised his fist towards the door slowly. Asterisk bang 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 asterisk. Belle immediately brought both fists up to the door and repeatedly banged against it as if he was escaping some sort of beast and needed shelter, repeating the process and growing louder as to drown out the guards yelling and plead to stop. The banging didn't stop until finally the doors were opened, showing Belle and Hayden a snarling face of a certain werewolf and surprised faces of a pair of Amazons, the happy smile of a strawberry blonde elf, a dull look on a dwarf's face and the leer of a certain high elf. What the hell are you doing here banging on our door? You fucking Rab-Gah. With one swift action, Beat now was face down on the floor, on his knees and grasping his nether regions, and faint whimpering was heard, as well as the painful groaning when Belle jumped atop his back and moved his feet on his back like a floor mat. Pardon the intrusion, Tilda. Oh hey. This floor mat works wonders on cleaning off the dirt. You should try it, Pops. We don't want to be rude, guest. Belle said innocently as he got off, allowing Hayden to step in his place, rather harshly as he slammed his right foot atop the werewolf's back and then the next. Take note, no one bothered to assist Beat as Hayden jumped on his back a few times to the point cracking was heard, nor did they get him when Hayden stepped off and kicked him out the door and faced the rest of the group. Hello, wife, Hayden said, spitting out the word with such malice as if it was poisoned down his throat, ticking off Riveria as she was instantly held by her wrist and waist from the Amazon, twins and the elf. And what brings your wretched face here to our home, darling? Ease up, Lady Riveria. Welcome to our manor, Belle. As such a surprise visit, Lefia said, struggling to hold her teacher as Tiona laughed as she was waving happily. Seeing her, Belle smiled as Tiona pushed Riveria back, forcing her sister and Lefia to catch her as she ran to him, and he did the same. Argo, Orna, both cried as they slapped each other's hands repeatedly, to then punching at each other's fist and forearms, and startling everyone when they headbutted each other and smacked each other's face and laughed as they wrapped each other by the shoulder and did a small dance, while arms linked by the elbows. Can you two ever come up with a sane handshake or greeting? Gareth asked as Tiona was then smacked upside the head by Tyon as she walked over and pulled her sister away from Belle, with Riveria and Lefia following suit as they greeted Belle and Hayden properly this time. It's been a while since you've visited in person, Belle. Mr. Hayden, what brings you to this sudden visit? Tyon asked while holding her sister tightly by her neck, simply to hold her in place, though tempted to choke her for suddenly pushing Riveria on her. It's been months. No visits. No letters. All I had to go by was Lefia's tellings of you and gossip from her and Filvis after you went to the dungeon together. And what's this about, eh? Crew, let me join in too, damn it. Tiona yelled, pouting and waving her arms a bit like a child before being silenced after feeling an ominous chill at her back and nails lightly digging into her neck. Tiona's childish antics aside, what brings you by with your father? Riveria asked with her eyes twitching at Hayden as Belle smiled, walking up to her and had his hands on his hips as he looked up to her. I'm here. Well, we're here for some family bonding activity. I need your and Pop's help in learning more about my magic, Belle said, practically beaming with happiness and twinkling in his eye as the others were in awe at him gaining magic. You have magic now, Argo. My Tilda, congratulations are in order then. Level 2 and now possessing magic. Ah, that's right. Filvis did mention you used magic on some of your dives together. And, particularly, a special type where you don't need incantations aside its name. Lady Riveria can surely be of aid to help you learn something else about your magic. Lefia praised her master as she looked up to her, only to be baffled at the confused but somewhat annoyed look. While I congratulate you about gaining magic, couldn't you have had this man teach you? While flattering I am about being asked to teach you, I don't see how you couldn't have just had your father teach and help you. Riveria said as Belle pulled out 2 papers from his pocket and showed it to her. I was actually going to have Pops help me, but from what Filvis said and heard from Lefia, you're the best when it comes to teaching magic, and given how me and Pops are concerned about my magic, some help would be needed. That end, well, you might want to take a look at that letter, Belle said, pointing to the paper in her left hand as she looked at it. Her familia looked at her in curiosity, as now they watched her banging her head into the wall and slowly dragging herself on the floor with her hands and knees, banging her fist with the crumpled-up letter in hand. Damn that woman, forcing me to get along with that man, she muttered as Belle and Hayden walked up behind her. You know that woman would return here and hunt you down again, and it goes the same for me, and I'd imagine she'd wring my neck for answers as to why he hasn't been taught by us together, Hayden said as he looked dead and spoke with a dull tone. Besides, Granny isn't forcing you two to get along. At the very least tolerate each other just in case for events. Calming Riveria and with a soft voice, Belle helped her up as she let out an exhausted sigh and returned the letter to Belle. Though that woman is being rather difficult, sadly I can't argue with her. Though on paper we're separated, there has to be at least a composure of goodwill between us. And that goes for you as well, Riveria said, poking Belle's forehead. Well, Pops and Grandad have been making me learn about the royal etiquette in case we're called to your home for an event. I know how to act at least. Still, I'm not really a fan of politics or stuffy business. Belle grumbled as Reveria could feel all eyes on her. Turning at her. Familiar members all looking at her with dull looks as they looked at her and Belle. Are you sure he isn't yours? He isn't. You all known me most of your lives. When have I ever gotten with this cretin? Reveria shouted as she pointed to Hayden, who flipped her off. He hates politics and business. He admitted to at least acting polite. Argo's free-spirited and liked what he does on his own decisions. And, well, standing all together, my lady, you three do make a somewhat believable family. More so if you can picture Belle with either of your hair color and ears. Lefia said as Reveria looked down at Belle and imagined him with her hair color, even if it was a lighter variant in ears, then turned to face Hayden. What on earth is it with the curses and mysteries of this world? Reveria muttered before she began to fan herself with the other paper Belle had given her, pausing for a moment as what was written on it caught her eye as she stopped her fanning and looked to see numbers. Finally taking notice, she saw it was a status sheet, specifically Belle's, as she read through it, eyes gazing and flowing through the numbers and words on the paper as they scrolled down to the end, eyes widening as she pulled Belle and Hayden closer to her, startling her familiar members as she pulled them to look at his status sheet closer. Selland, is this what I believe? It is. Hard to believe it at first. Though, this is more of a glass cannon if anything, and risky on his part, which is why even I thought it best to have some help with teaching him. I also had some ideas to experiment with it, under watch and guidance just in case it becomes too much, along with maybe minimizing how much mana I'd use for it. For a while, the three of them were lost in their own mutterings and discussions with one another before Reveria rolled up the status sheet and handed it to Hayden, looking over at the others and motioned Lefia to follow them as she escorted them elsewhere in the manor. Hey, Mima, where are you taking Argo? I'm going to borrow the yard and some books from the library to assist Belle's training in magic. His particular magic is odd and troubling to practice blind. Hence, why I need Lefia, and maybe Alicia if we see her to join in helping him. If Finn gets back from Hephaestus's shops, tell him I'm borrowing some of his books as well. Reveria said as she continued walking, though her ears twitched and scowled at being followed by the twins and Gareth. Speaking of said midget, Tyon, how's the wedding planning coming along? And did he slip a ring on you yet? Belle said, turning back and walking backwards with his arms resting over his head, seeing Tyon giggling while Gareth and Tiona sighed and Lefia shaking her head. Sadly not yet. Our captain is a bit preoccupied with getting our expedition ready soon. But he did take me on a small outing date for some supplies together and bought me a meal. Unacceptable. It's progress and I congratulate you on that and hope it was a good time, but still unacceptable. He better find some jewels or a diamond in the dungeon for you to make a ring out of it and engage you when you get back. Dwarf man, make this woman a ring, but if you can't do that, then bash the midget's head in with your helmet and force him to propose. TSK. Laddie can't just force marriage like that. And I ain't bashing my friend's head into forcefully dash. If there's a wedding, there's booze. And if there's a booze, then it's a celebration till we have our fill. Plus, the midget had it coming for not taking responsibility yet after what he did to her. And also, do you want to make her cry, Gareth? Who's gonna walk her down the aisle? Belle exclaimed as Tyon blushed and now had a skip to her step as Gareth paused for a moment and imagined it in his head. You tempted me with booze. But I see your point. Still, things like this takes time. Well, it's either that or watch as the midget gets brutally beaten by Otto if he so much as flirts with his daughter or even gives her a flout as a sign of wanting to date her. Belle said, earning the others to wince at the idea of Finn pissing off Otto of all people and can most likely see how badly their captain would be if he did that. Wait, the king is a father. Tiona screeched out. Technically, yeah. Though, not really. Think of it like how me and Pops are along with Reveria. We're not family by blood, but we're family. Don't drag me into your odd family tree, please. Too late. Granny made it official, so you're my ma. Meaning you got to be extra protective of me with girls, I guess. That's how moms are with their sons, right? And dads are protective of their daughters too, which explains Otter. Belle said, earning confused looks from Hayden and Reveria. How moms are. What do you mean dash? Say Pops, if I turned into a girl or was already a girl, would you be as protective for me like Otter? Or more? Belle asked, earning many to trip over and fall as Hayden smacked the top of his head before he shook him. Why on earth would you even ask something like that? Do you plan to become a woman? Hayden roared in a panic voice. No, but truth be told I did spend time as one during my travels before Orario. It was a temporary thing and by accident from my teacher in Japan. Belle said, shocking Hayden and Riveria, and the girls especially. Soon the idea and image of Belle as a girl flooded their minds and various reactions sparked on their faces. Tyon smiled, thinking Belle would make a cute girl, though still be his boyish and adventurous and blunt self-majority of the time. Lefia was somewhat having a crisis, imagining Belle to be cute and adorable like a rabbit, and took quite a turn when she thought of Belle and Filvis waiting for her with smiles on their faces. Tiona was an odd mix of excitement and jealousy, as she was grinning and thought of the fun adventures and girls' night and hangouts they can do together. Part of her brain went on to if they went to the bathhouse together, and could imagine the large bunnies Belle would have in the chest area if he was a girl, especially since he had a pretty big carrot already, that lead to the idea he'd hold some pretty big rabbits. Riveria oddly felt her heart beating in calm at the idea of Belle being a girl at first, remembering the days she was acting like a mother to Ace all those years ago, and even still. Now, the idea of Belle as a girl coming to her for help was soothing and sweet, though she'd be lying if him asking her today just now wasn't as sweet. His want of a teacher and guidance today somewhat awoken her maternal instincts, though she would hide it because of Hayden's presence. Hayden, however, was shocked and felt his brain was about to break. The idea of Belle being a girl was mind-boggling in of itself, worried for the repercussions and side effects that it must have given him. But what he found odd and gave him fear and rage was the idea of Belle, as a girl, getting hit on or being harmed by anyone trying to get into his heart and body. Where is your teacher? I'll kill him and anyone that dared even look at you when you were a girl in that state. Hayden roared as lightning crackled around his staff and sword shining with murderous gleam. Autilda, you would be protective of me if I was a girl, Pops. Belle said, smiling as he went to hug Hayden, snapping him out of his rage-induced stupor and blushing to the point he was practically a tomato. Hey, never mention this to the others. Where is your idiotic teacher? I want to kill them for making you temporarily a girl. Come on, Pops. It's not like it killed me or anything. Besides, it was a fresh perspective and I learned much about romance as a woman from it. Auntie Afy was apologizing to me after it happened and worked non-stop to have her children make an antidote. Belle said, laughing at how flustered Hayden was becoming as Lefia's ears perked at that name and mention of children. Auntie Afy. And children. Is she related to you or dash? No, she's my teacher and taught me the ways of romance and adventures in the world. Aphrodite. Belle said, earning many jaws to drop as Hayden fell to his knees on the floor while clutching Belle's shoulders to support him up. She's your teacher. Yeah, she's pretty funny and kind. She even gave me the proper lessons of, well, actual romance and love life better than my shitty gramps, along with some of the other things about the birds and bees. Belle said, earning Riveria and Hayden to sigh in relief as they put their hands over their hearts and relaxed. While it's a relief that you're fine, please don't scare us with sudden news like that. Riveria said, patting the top of his head, questioning to herself why she instinctively did that and, more so, why didn't she stop herself? No promises about scaring you with stuff I did in the past, but I'll think over it and warn you. At least, Belle said, smiling as he had his hands behind his head, ignoring the small pain of Hayden chopping his head and clutching his heart. You better. And for the record, don't ever tell Lady Freya about this. I have no idea on what utter chaos or panic she would be in to learn you were taught by Aphrodite and see her as your aunt. Hayden yelled as Belle sighed. Fee any Tilda, I won't tell her. But one day if Afy comes to Orario, it's gonna come out. Eventually. And the others already know about this. They asked me for some other stories of my past, and I told them about this one. When was this? Today. While you tried to barricade yourself in your room to avoid coming here. Belle said, making Hayden fall to his knees once more and punching the floor and banging his head against it. WWL. startling revelations of Belle's past experience and relations to the goddess. Aphrodite. Should we continue with starting the lessons? Lefia asked, hoping to break everyone out of their startled stupors as she smiled when Belle looked excited and grabbed hold of Reveria and Haydine's hands and followed Lefia. Yeah, let's go pups. Ma, sorry about leaving you Orna, but let's hang out after the lessons. I promise you we'll hang out. Lead the way, Lefia. Belle screamed as Lefia was then forced to run down the halls of the manor to find the library and then gather the necessary books. Reveria needed to assist with Belle in understanding magic. The trio of adventurers could only look ahead before dispersing off to their own ways in the manor, with Gareth saying to the twins he would retrieve Beat and bring him to the medical wing if his injuries down there was serious, as Tyon said she and her sister would wait in their rooms and watch from the window on how Belle's lessons would be. Tilda. Well, that was quite the surprise Belle just dropped on us. A goddess of love as his auntie and teacher in romance and adventures. Traveled to a Forgene land and maybe more in his travels before coming here. And being a girl for a while, that was pretty interesting. Tyon listed off as she dragged her sister back to their room as she was frozen stiff. I can kinda picture him being cute as a girl, but can't help but feel like he'd be the same as he is regardless of his gender. Still, it doesn't seem he was too bothered about it. What do you think about it? Scared you? No, but I want to see Argo as a girl now to check on something. Tiona said with a bit of bite and dullness in her voice. Check on what? If he's bigger than me when he's a girl, does he have Gia age? Tiona cried out as she was smacked against the wall like a bat by her sister as she was then dragged by one of her legs back to her room. Don't be like Loki, sis. And it doesn't matter if they are or aren't. Size isn't everything. Oh, sure you say that with those melons on your chest. But look at me. I want to know if I beat Argo as a girl. Well, I doubt you would beat Belle's size if he turned into a girl. Given how he's got a nice cock down there and how he's a grower, maybe his chest could match mine or even some goddesses. Tyon said, smirking at how flustered her sister became and watched as she shut her eyes and covered her ears. La 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 la. I can't hear you. Not listening. Not listening. About Argo's carrot and how big he is. Tiona cried as Tyon shook her head and rolled her eyes, continuing to drag her sister back to their room. Honestly, if she likes him, she should make her move soon before any other Amazon husses try to get into his heart. And pants. Why are you so startled about his cock? We've seen it already and you even called dibs. She muttered in an amused tone. After a bit of time and searching around the manor home for the needed materials and on a side quest to search for Alicia, Reveria, Haydeen, Lefia and Belle were now outside the manor, in the training arena as the two adult high elves stood before Belle, who sat cross-legged on the grassy floor with Lefia standing aside him. Okay, now Lefia, I need you to understand that what we're going to be assisting with Belle for now must be kept confidential. Spilling one's secrets of their magic is a violation of privacy and could put him at risk. We're the only ones, along with Alicia if later on she would know and wish to join us in assistance, to learn about his magic. Reveria said in a serious tone to her apprentice as Lefia nodded frivolously. Understood, master. T-they, is his magic dangerous? Lefia timidly asked, with curiosity in her eyes. It's somewhat dangerous, though some would see it as a cheat to our way of learning and overcoming the limits to magic. You're away we can only learn 3 magic spells at a time. Haydeen said, pushing his glasses up as Lefia nodded. Good. Now, imagine a type of magic that allows the user to manipulate elements taught or discovered by practice. The limits to this being only certain elements they are compatible with, and can range from being chants, incantations, or swift magic types. Haydeen finished off as he and Reveria looked at Lefia as her eyes widened and then gazed upon Belle. That's all just from one magic skill. Indeed, though it's dangerous in the sense it drains more mana and more occurrences in mind down to occur, especially to newly taught or discovered magic he can practice and manipulate, and swapping it, say from using fire to water element magic, also causes mind down and exhaustion to the body. Reveria continued as she opened one of the books she brought in hand and used her staff to levitate a few others and flip through some pages in them. Now with what Belle mentioned to us recently, experimenting of it can be useful and learning to minimize the mana output on the spells, in theory, can reduce the drawback. issues his magic hers. She then gazed at Belle and let the book in her hand float around her as she placed her hand above his head. A rune magic circle appeared as it glowed above him. You've used the first magic spell you were able to unlock, correct? Was there any difficulties in using it before you felt fatigued? Any mind down recently or before when you first tested it? Reveria asked as Belle shook his head and scratched his cheek. Well, not really when I first used it in the dungeon with Pops and the others. Though I would say the first time I used it, I did feel drained a bit and a little out of breath. But I was fine. I did ask Uncle and Hythe to come with me in the first floor a few days after to see what my limit was. Him. Smart of you to bring him and Hythe just in case. Though, knowing you and the idiot, you probably suffered mine down. Did Hythe tell you what your limit was? Hayden crossed his arms and raised his eyebrows as Belle as he nodded and held up his hands. Yeah. She said that after 7 times of using my magic I was getting more out of breath and tired. And after that, I think I remember firing it 5 or 6 times before everything became dark and my eyes felt heavy. Belle explained as Reveria returned her hand back, rubbing her fingers as she saw wisps of white on her fingers as she looked to Hayden. Rough to estimate given on his own experiment of his limits. But perhaps he can use that spell 12 to 13 times. Though what monster did you face when he first used it in the dungeon? A baby dragon again. We were fighting other monsters along our way down the 11th floor. But I did take note his spell was rather large and killed it after injuring it somewhat. With Hogni, I suspect that he wasn't aware of how much mana he pooled into it. He answered, as he looked at Belle and showed his hand, crackling it with lightning as he moved it slowly in his face. Belle, given all this, it's best to say that with the baby dragon you first faced, you weren't aware of how much mana you poured into your spell. This is another danger to magic, especially for yours. Your father is right. Think of magic and mana like an empty cup and water. The cup is you, wanting to use the magic skill, and the water is the mana needed to fill the cup. You fill it with enough mana for you to use, and then use it. The cup is filled and then emptied when you use magic. Reveria explained as Belle nodded in understanding. Though the water itself in this example isn't infinite. Each race and depending on the person, there's a limit to how much mana they possess, and controlling it is difficult. Say you want to fill the cup only about a quarter full, but without properly pouring the water incorrectly, you risk overflowing the cup than you intend to fill it. Lefia chimed in as Reveria and Hayden nodded to her assistance in explaining it to Belle. So this is like that flow thing I heard Hythe said. She mentioned I'd be more or less learning this flow thing to help with my mana control and basics. Belle muttered as Reveria and Hayden blinked in surprise as Lefia's eye twinkled. Ah, you see, when dealing with magic and control, practitioners in magic and other types of spells and mystic arts call the exercise of feeling mana throughout your body as flow. Lefia chimed in, puffing her chest as she took a deep breath in and exhaled, pointing to her chest and down as she raised her finger up into her arms. The exercise is similar to some meditation practices and physical training. Its key is to allow your body to absorb the mana from the surrounding area, and channeling your mana from within to flow all throughout your body. Oh, so it's similar to some of the exercises and training I've gone in my travels. Belle said as he hopped on his 2 feet, spreading his feet apart a bit and his fist pumped and set at his sides, taking in a few deep breaths in and out as he closed his eyes. There's similar exercises you've learned that are similar to flow. What were they meant to teach you? Lefia asked as Hayden and Reveria grew curious, leering their eyes as they sensed mana building within his body as he breathed. I learned a few different styles of fighting, though I couldn't master some of them. In Tibet, I learned a few styles of fighting from the monks there. They said it was to harness the power of the sun, Hemen, but though I got stronger, I couldn't harness it at all. Belle said, sweating, as he then relaxed his shoulders and arms, beginning to move slowly with each second as if he was slowly inching at each movement slightly. In the region of Hong Kong, I learned this exercise technique meant to relax the soul and body to give better blood flow. But don't let this slow movement trick you. It's difficult to master as you need a strong will of mind and calmness to allow the body to rest and move slowly. Oh, interesting. So this is meant to strengthen your mind and resolve. How disciplined these masters and fighters must be. Lefia said as Belle returned his arms back to his sides and bucked his knees, kicking the air and moving his hands slowly and striking the air. They weren't fighters, Lefia. Well, some of them were. But this was taught by the elderly as means of longevity and to increase your lifespan. It's been said that to attain longevity, calmness, and flow of the blood is said to lead the body to grow strong to live for 1,000 years. And this is taught from a large country in a southern continent named Brazil. Bell roared and cried as he struck the air with his legs and palms, swiping the air and moving around, his breathing growing intense and sweat falling from his forehead as steam was emitting off him. Reveria and Hadine's gazes intensified when they felt the stagnation of mana flowing through his body and caught glimpse of flames and sparks escaping his hands. And breathing. This is a fighting style called Brazilian kickboxing known as capoeira. It's a mixture of fighting and kicking while also taking the boxing fighting style into it. Capoeira is also known to be a dance of fighting, and combining it with another style of fighting meant to channel a flow movement to strike, it becomes a dance of battling. I see. And it does indeed look like you're dancing. I can hardly keep up if you're going to strike with a kick or if you're meant to move across like that. Lefia said as she had to turn her head to keep up with Bell's speed, shielding her eyes as Bell dashed and jumped back to where he stood, exhaling a breath of air as he parted his feet and pumped his fist under his arms outward, nearly squatting as he inhaled a deep breath in. By this point Lefia had noticed the steam emitting off of Bell and just now detected mana flowing within, and from another teacher of mine that taught me techniques that said would help me later down the line, is to channel this inner spirit of mine and focus on its release. Brace yourselves. Bell's eyes snapped open. Hadine and Reveria braced themselves as Rivera went in front of Lefia. What is this? Both high elves thought as they felt immense pressure coming out of Bell, forcing them to grit their teeth as Bell's eyes seemed to glare into the space before them. Not even looking at them, but as if he was staring into a void or something further away. The ground beneath him cracked and protrusions of stone and dirt rose from beneath, the grass rustling as if harsh wind was blowing against it. Reveria noticing the windows of the manor shaking and even the curtains inside ruffling. Eyes widened as she saw Tyon and Tiona bracing themselves and holding onto one another. Hey, Bell. Hadine cried as the pressure then died down slowly as Bell let out a tired breath, his chest rising and falling as he looked over to Hadine as Reveria watched him, running towards the boy. Unbelievable. Was that actually the exercise? I've heard the exercise is different to others as some feel it naturally or some are tired from practicing. But with him, he was able to channel mana with those other exercise and that last technique, expel it to an aura that felt like something was pressing down on me. She was too lost in her thoughts to pay attention to anything else around her. All she saw was Bell, standing before her as he was sweating and tired, breathing and saw his eyes flinching, and wince from exhaustion as small pants of breath could be seen escaping his lips. All those techniques and exercises, and traveled to different regions and continents before coming here. What else could he have learned in his travels that could cause such a potent build-up of mana surpassing a normal level 2 adventurer's mana reserves? That mana felt as if it was one from a level 3, maybe even on Lefia's level. Baffled by the magic and mana she felt expelling out of him, her head turned to Lefia by her side as she was flustered, and waving her arms before returning her gaze to Bell. Him mentioning of his idea of a mother and a father, what were his parents? Could he actually be a different race than a human? Maybe part elf like Aina, or maybe an actual elf but with his ears cut at birth. Lady Reveria, this is bad. Lefia shouted as she shook her harshly, alerting Reveria as she shook her head and widened her eyes as she looked at her apprentice in a frantic what? What should we do? Bell hands, they're on fire. Lefia shouted as Bell ran around in circles with Hadine dumping water and dirt on his hands. Bell's screams filled the training ground as Hadine was now trying to use the books they collected to fan the flames off. How did they catch on fire? I don't know. They were fine until that weird feeling and pressure was gone, and then I just noticed a small flame forming at his knuckles before the burst in flames and he screamed about them. How is it water isn't getting rid of it? It died down a bit before they burst again. Hadine questioned as he threw the book aside as Bell waved his hands and gasped and panicked. How did this happen? I just did the flow thing like Lefia explained. but I used some of the other similar techniques and practices that were like it. My hand. Ha. Bell paused as he looked down at his hands, covered in warm orange and yellow flames as he flexed his fingers and opened and closed his hands. Pops, is it natural for fire to not hurt? Bell questioned as Hayden and Lefia paused and came closer, inspecting the flame as they watched his hands were still moving and fine, not even smelling burnt skin or seeing any burning occur. This isn't your firebolt spell, but it's not going out with dirt or water. Hayden said in disbelief, placing his finger under his chin as he watched Bell raise his arms and turn to the side, aiming his hands out opened and towards the ground. HNGH. I'm trying to shoot it off like with my magic, but it's still on me. Damn, did I mess up this flow thing in magic? Bell pouted, punching the air behind him as he then no longer felt the warmth in his right hand. Turning behind him, he saw Hayden and Lefia moving aside and a part of the stone wall around the manor was now scorched black. Looking down at his left hand, he aimed at the ground with his right. He clocked his arm back and punched the ground. A small explosion soon lit the ground beneath him as Hayden and Lefia shielded their eyes, blocking their view from the brightness and heat they felt. Coughing as soon as the brightness died down and dirt clouding their vision for a moment before eyes widened in, surprised to see a small crater by Bell's feet, scorched and black smoke emitting from it and Bell's fist free from flames. Whoa, I punched it with flames in my hand and shot a fist full of fire at the wall by accident, Bell said in disbelief, blinking a few times as he looked at Lefia and Hayden, with Lefia smiling and clapping her hands as Hayden adjusted his glasses and looked in awe. Bell, I think that this is part of your magic. You must have grasped the part of your magic that allows you to use free form with your fire magic. It makes sense. And when they gone out with the water, you might have unintentionally relit your fist with your magic. Are you feeling alright? Any headaches aside the exhaustion from moving around and doing those exercises? Hayden said as now he and Lefia were questioning Bell of his magic and if he was alright, leaving Reveria somewhat dumbfounded and in awe at Bell.